the day after yesterday when we were here last. Good to see you all again. Appreciate your coming back. Um, Deputy Mayor here and I consulted. We're going to spend 10 minutes on each one. We'll be out in 50 minutes. How does that sound? Like a plan? Okay. Yeah. Yeah, maybe don't hold your breath on that. So anyway, special work session. Our agenda is available on the door as you came, or by the door as you came in. We've got 5 items. We're going to have presentations on Finance Department, Urban Renewal Districts, Fire Department, Municipal Court, and then a budget wrap-up from our Finance Director. Before we start with public comment, Chris, anything in the way of preliminaries? Okay, very good. We will have an opportunity for public comment, but it'll come at the end of the discussion on those 5 items. And I can't predict when that will be, except that it won't be in 50 minutes. So if you'd like to make comment on anything on our agenda, you're welcome to do that now, as well as things not on our agenda. At the very end of the meeting, there'll be another opportunity for comment on things not on our agenda. So this is a time for public comment. We just ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us name and address. So please use the podium and keep your voice up so we can all hear.
Kevin Nelson, 4235 Bruce Avenue. In my opinion, and I talked to county commissioners this morning about this, and in my opinion, that since the county taxpayers pay, I'm not sure the exact amount. I thought it was around 30% into the planning department's budget, county taxpayers. In my opinion, if the city county planning cannot be the lead organization or body that expands the TIF district. We don't know, there's a conflict of interest because they're getting money from us county taxpayers. Does the city county planning board have the county taxpayers' interest in mind? Or is it just the city taxpayers? I wouldn't know. But I would argue that there's a clear conflict here. And that was the issue I raised with the county commissioners this morning. And I think the city county planning board just needs to step aside. If that's the TIF expansion you're going to do, you delegate that to a different agency. And if it's a budget amendment that's needed, if there's budget money in that planning budget for this TIF expansion, that needs to be shifted away, because I think you're always going to be able to say that, hey, there's a conflict of interest. The county taxpayers were not, their interest was not protected or held, or whatever the reason would be, because there might be a whole lot of county taxpayers really ain't interested in paying for a city pool. And that's about what this is coming down to. And I'm not so sure there's a whole lot of school district 2 taxpayers interested in paying for a city pool. But if the people in Warden found out that they're paying for a city pool, I'll bet they're not going to be real happy about it. And then they're paying for a budget, they're paying the planning department that's facilitating the expansion, that anything over and above the base is captured county tax revenues that go into the city coffers. That's an argument I don't know if you want to have or not. It's an argument you're probably going to have, because the county commissioners know what's going on. I think they're going to be asking some questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Next.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Adela Honor. I live at 1109 Delphinium. And what prompted me to come this evening to talk to you is the 17% rate increase that Northwestern Energy just enacted after a not very long ago 28% increase. So I know right now the city is grappling with budget issues, and not just the normal ones after the fallout from the property tax bills. So I know that you have a lot of hard decisions to make, and I know it's always hard decisions and choices, but it seems like it must be that, especially now. So the way that this is going through my brain as I think about a 17% rate increase, uh, that money has got to come from someplace. So I'm assuming if the city's paying 17% more for electricity, it means less or reduced or eliminated city services. And uh, the thought of that really upsets me. So we pay more for electricity. We're not really getting anything more, but we're losing a lot. And um, I I don't like this trade-off. And of course, as a homeowner, I'm paying this increase at home. If I go shopping anywhere in Billings, businesses are absorbing this rate increase. So maybe they're raising their prices and then um, either increase city taxes or losing city services. So it's a triple whammy that that hits the average citizen. So what I'm asking the city to do is officially comment during the PSC hearings, which start on June 9th. That's Monday, June 9th. And I would like the city to stand up for citizens and city taxpayers and just say, enough is enough. This is hurting our citizens. It is a strain on city services and city budgets. And I plan to comment personally myself because it affects me personally. But I would like the city to submit official comments against this 17% rate increase. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. This is a time for public comment. Is there any other public comment at this time? Any other public comment before we close the public comment period? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period and move on to our regular agenda. Item 1, first sub-item is our finance department. So Andy's going to be bookends here, start and finish tonight. So Andy, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name. I'll be faster than 10 minutes for the Finance Department, but not for anything else. Here we go. So, Finance Department, we have 13 FTE total to handle a variety of services identified there. We are recommending as part of this budget holding two finance department positions vacant that are currently vacant. That would be the grants administrator position. It was temporary or partially filled for majority of this last fiscal year. And then the budget analyst position, which was added in the FY25 budget, was never filled and is currently vacant. That's obviously to help balance the budget. All other positions, though, remaining filled, and if one became vacant, we would endeavor to replace those folks as well. Not going to read you the list of things we do, but you have that. We have an operating budget from the general fund of about 1.9 million. 1.2 of that is for personnel. The remainder is O&M. For us, the largest O&M is IT support and software. We have the accounting and budgeting software. Takes quite a bit of bandwidth, I think, from IT. Costs a fair amount, and then property tax software as well. We also pay for the city's annual audit out of the finance department, and that's budgeted at $120,000 this year. If you're looking at the budget overview, you'll see the department budget is more than 1.9 million. That's because we're responsible for making all the debt payments, collecting all the associated tax revenues for all those debt payments. And then we have a central service fund that handles internal copying and mailing. That's also under the finance department. Those three areas make up your finance department. Looking forward into the future, not in FY26, but I'm hoping maybe starting to explore some of these options to bring something to you in FY27 would be to implement AI or some form of automation. We spend a lot of staff time on really these 5 areas. I think there's opportunity there for reducing the amount of staff time. I mean, these are very manual and time-intensive processes. I think there's a real opportunity here to reduce that staff time necessary to kind of build the budget book, build out our annual financial report, do some of the kind of more routine, business license review or some bank account reconciliations. So I think that's probably where you'll see maybe some changes coming in the future. We've started some preliminary exploration there, but nothing real concrete yet. That's all I have for the finance department. So, yeah, as promised, that would be short and nothing else will be tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Andy.
Mhm.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
I got 2 more presentations tonight.
Yeah,
so,
well-
yeah.
We'll have a few questions. I'll start us off,
Okay.
and let's go clockwise around the table. But the budget analyst, I understand the need not to fill it, but did we make any sort of a calculation of the degree to which that position paid for itself, at least in the old days? I assume it more than paid for itself in spades. We don't live in that world anymore, but can you just comment on long-term whether we need to be making sure we get that position filled again, the grant administrator? I'm sorry, I
the
said
grant
budget
administrator?
analyst, but
Okay.
I meant
Yeah.
the grant administrator.
So I think the grant administrator probably did pay for itself even in that first year. We found success, I think, primarily in smaller non-federal organizations. We did get a fair number of small grants from Walmart, Shields, that probably we wouldn't have pursued otherwise because we had somebody regularly and routinely looking for those. Looking for federal grants, those aren't that hard for departments to find. They're usually reaching out to you and letting you know they're available. But those smaller foundations, private organizations, you kind of got to go hunt for those. So I think there probably is an opportunity there in the future. And then looking at expanding that to grant compliance as well. That's another area that I think we could see some benefit at the city. Right now it's very decentralized. If the police department gets a grant, they're responsible for compliance primarily. And having somebody who's more focused on that would be helpful.
Okay, well, that's academic at this for this
Sure.
year, but
Yep.
something to keep in mind. Any other questions for Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, you and I had talked some time ago about audits, and you had indicated that we might be struggling down the road to find anyone, even to do the audit, much less pay for it. How is that going right now, and what's the future there?
We won't struggle to pay for it because we have to have it done. So it will be a priority for my department and city council. Right now we have a contract for, I'm going to guess, probably 2 or 3 more years with the firm out of Great Falls. They have a few offices in Montana. We got 3 responses the last time we did an RFP, which I thought was really low for a city our size. And I think only 1 firm from Montana. The rest of them were from out of state. So there is some interest from out of state firms in Montana, but at this point, I think that could be a problem in the future, just being a rural part of the country.
Very good. Councilor Renese? No. Coming around here, Bill, Councilor Gulick. Okay,
Nailed it.
I
All right.
guess so. All right, well, thanks very much. That's the Finance Department. Next up is our TIF districts, our urban renewal districts. And I'm not sure we're gonna have, who's orchestrating that,
So,
Chris?
so I'll be presenting the majority of it, and Wyeth, I think, is going to help on one of the slides, right, Wyeth? Looking to you. Yeah, okay, perfect. And then representatives from all the districts are here as well for any specific questions. Those of you who have been on council before, you've seen these slides. These are all obviously updated for this year. We have this umbrella, which I've called the Urban Renewal Funds, which is really 4 funds: your Downtown Revolving Loan Fund, and then your 3 tax increment districts. The Downtown Revolving Loan Fund, we've budgeted $800,000 in loans for that fund. It's a revolving loan fund. We haven't seen a lot of activity in this fund. I don't know why that is necessarily. I think our rates probably are, the rates are 1% less than prime. And I think just because rates aren't that great right now, there's not a lot of interest, or perhaps they're finding financing elsewhere. But there hasn't been a lot of activity here, but we do have budgeted an anticipation of $800,000. The max for that for an individual loan is $250,000. There's sufficient cash to handle that if we were to see that type of interest. The 3 tax increment districts. So we'll start with downtown. There's a total budget of $2.7 million. That's $1.3 million for debt payments that are currently outstanding. That's for the 2-way street conversions, Empire Garage, I believe, and I think that's it. There might be another one in there. There's an anticipated transfer to the parking department to offer the free holiday parking again this year. We have an internal cost allocation for finance department and planning department time spent with each of these districts. You'll see it, and that's $103,000. The DBP operating agreement at $326,000, and then in downtown we have $824,000 budgeted for development incentives. Some of these you've already approved, and some of them there's kind of a anticipated estimated amount. Those obviously would come to you individually on a case-by-case basis, as they currently do, but that total is $824,000. The estimated total revenue is $3.2 million for downtown, the increment being $3 million, and interest income at $200,000. These, and this is true for all 3 districts, the increment revenue at this point is really an estimate. We did get some preliminary information from the DOR, again, with these tax changes. I think we are at a reasonable dollar amount, but for all of them. But I think it wouldn't be unrealistic to see a fluctuation of plus or minus probably 7 to 10% on any of these. It's really a function of, in my opinion, how much residential is within each of these districts. So, we may see one go up or one go down just because the residential rates are dropping so much. And if that makes up a larger portion of the district, you would see a relative shift there. So this slide here shows the value of the district since its inception, which was in 2006. The flat line at the bottom is the base value, and then the number up top is the total value, the difference being the increment. The growth in this district since inception has been 93.7%. This is the first year that the growth in the district has not outpaced the city growth since 2006, which is 99%. Typically, you'd look at these, and you'll see it in the other 2 districts, that the TIF districts outpace the growth of the city. You're all aware that there's a large portion of this district that is centrally assessed. You can see the fluctuations, especially on the out years there. I guess my pointer's not there. There it is. Yeah, the centrally assessed goes up and down nearly every other year. There is a trend. It is still trending up, but that's what drives that kind of up and down there. It's primarily the telecommunications centrally assessed downtown. But at this point in time, the growth is not outpacing the city in this district. Yeah. Taxable value. Yeah, so if we take the taxable value in 2006 compared to 2024, tax year 2024 for the city, we've seen 99% growth in the city as a whole relative to the district where it's 93.7. And this, again, this is the first year that I can read, at least since I've been doing this slide, which I think 5-6 years, that it's been less than the city. Okay. The South TIF, here their budget is $35 million, $2.7 million for debt payments. That includes known debt payments and an anticipated debt payment for the rec center, which we're working on the sale of those bonds at this point in time. Cost allocation here at 11,000. I feel like that's low. I may have to double check that. The Esper operating agreement, 160,000. And then capital outlay includes both the rec center and the South Pool. South Pool currently not in the district. You're aware we're looking at expansion, but had to kind of plug that budget amount somewhere, and this is the only place that made sense. You will see a recommendation from staff to move the $20 million out of the FY26 budget and into the FY25 budget because that project has begun. You've started awarding some contracts, and that's not changing the dollar amount, just shifting the timing. But currently, it is in the proposed budget because that's in line with your CIP. And here we have $2.8 million in development incentives, 1.6 of that already approved. That's Torgerson and the Yellowstone Ice Foundation, and then another 1.25 million for anticipated projects. I'll take this point or this time to say we do the cash flow projections for all 3 districts with these budgets. We're positive cash flow for all years on all 3 districts. In the South TIF, tax increment revenue of about 5 million, interest income 140,000, and then bond proceeds for the 29.6. Here again, if you guys approved moving it from 26 to 25, the bond proceeds would go down by 20 million and moved into 25. And that's where I made the note here that this is actually the district that the DOR thinks might go down by potentially $400,000. And again, I suspect that's because it's the larger portion of this district, relative to the other districts, a larger portion of this district is residential. But just a projection at this point. Same graph as before, but obviously this district was established in a different year. You've seen good growth in this district, 97% relative to the city growth since 2008 at 78.5%. And then finally, the East Tax Increment District, it's our smallest district. Total budget of 1.3 million, debt payments of about $500,000, cost allocation at 80,000. The Bird operating agreement, just under 180. And then development incentives at 550,000. Here you've already approved the Best Friends Animal, the animal hospital, veterinary clinic, I believe, at 475, and then another 77,000 of anticipated projects and programs. 1.3 million in total revenue, 1.2 of that is tax increment. All 3 districts do get a small portion of state entitlement share. They are specific to that district. They are not a portion of that comes to the city and allocated there. These are specific to the district. So that's included in that increment number. And then interest income of 60,000. And here, this district was established in 2007 and has seen 89.9% growth since then, relative to the city's 88.9% growth since 2007. This slide here, just to put them all side by side for you, all the same information, but just to give you some side by side comparison. This, I'll turn to Wyeth on that one. Does that work?
Is that on? Yep, you can hear me. Okay, cool. So yeah, so just wanted to touch on this item tonight. We will need to have a lot more in-depth discussion at another time, obviously, since you're going through a variety of the budgets this evening and the whole budget process. But as many of you are aware, especially those on the legislative committee from the session that just ended, there was a change at the state level, Senate Bill 3, that required that any future or required that advisory boards for urban rural districts in cities, and it also applied to TEDs in counties, but doesn't apply for us, that those advisory boards needed to be appointed by the local municipality. And importantly, and this was a big part of, I think, what the legislation intent was also to make sure that there's representation on each of those advisory boards from the county that the municipality is in and from a school district or school districts, which actually is the case in South Billings, that are also included within those urban rural district boundaries. So so that was passed, signed by the governor. It takes effect October 1. The part that we're navigating right now and been visiting a lot here with the 3 districts and their staff and some of their board members, and then also internally with Andy and Gina Dahl, our city attorney, is looking at what that means in regard to how going forward we would manage and handle that, and how the council and the mayor would handle that. The city has code in your city code under section 2500 that deals with how city boards and commissions are managed, unless they are specifically otherwise, statutorily defined or guided. And as an example of that, like our city zoning commission, there's statutory requirements for city zoning commissions, and so they have to operate at a little bit different set of rules than what other city boards and commissions would. So our analysis to this point is that with the new state law saying that that these advisory boards must be appointed by the city council and the mayor, they then would fall under as a city board or commission, city board, advisory board in this case. And so that change how they operate. The code requires staff liaison, and basically it's the way, and you're familiar with these boards and commissions, they're managed within the city basically, and then you all handle appointments and if there's vacancies and stuff like that. So what we're trying to figure out now, we have a couple things also going on. One is that all 3 of the MOUs for the 3 entities that we have now, which are not city board and commissions, as you know, we have MOUs with 3 nonprofit entities that are separate from the city. They have their own bylaws, they appoint their own board members, and then that MOU dictates how they work within the districts, bring information to city staff and then to the council with urban renewal applications. We've had grant opportunities. There's been a variety of things that have come along in that case. Those MOUs all expire on June 30th. Those were put in place, and then last year we renewed them for 1 year, kept them the same, but we're back again. And then the new law takes effect, as I said, October 1. So we have those couple things going on. What we're trying to figure out right now, and this is where we would I've already got us scheduled for the July 21st work session, is to dive in more with you all and how this change, like what are we gonna do? There's it's not, and Gina Dahl, our city attorney, has been working a lot with me on this, is trying to figure out if we make these switches, if those boards and commissions or boards, excuse me, have to be advisory and they fall, as the law states, and they have to fall under the city, and there's that process, that obviously looks a lot different than what we have right now. And so we're trying to navigate that. A lot of conversation with the districts because obviously that significantly impacts them. There's a lot of concern right now from them, understandably so. That, I mean, as you see, there's budget that goes to those 3 districts. There's, funds that are helping with staff. There's funds that are being used for some of the operations. Obviously, all things that are tied to urban renewal, but that's a significant difference in that respect. So we're working through that. I guess a couple things to mention, and then happy to try to answer questions. But we do want to drill into this more when we have just that's all we're doing at a agenda item. There's concern. I mean, the issue of like, well, what about representation from the different districts? Well, that doesn't have to change at all in the sense that this council and mayor can say, yeah, we want representation the same way that there's representation now from people, business owners in those districts, residents in those districts, whatever that might be. That all could happen. You can still have all that in place. The part that's more complicated and significant is how do we, how are they operated and supported? If there's a staff liaison, how does that work? Obviously, we, some of us are sort of staff liaisons now, but this would be different. And the way we would manage and bring applications and things through potentially would be different than it is now, going right through the advisory board and the staff and coming to council. It doesn't mean that an entity couldn't operate still independently of the process. For example, if you like the BIRD, the business, the Billings Industrial Revitalization District in eBird that was formed and was the part that brought, the whole idea of the district and all to the city originally, and then was involved in a master plan that we did that was related but not directly part of the urban renewal process. An entity like that could continue to exist and could continue to do things. They just wouldn't be the they wouldn't be the advisory entity in the same way that we have now. So there's a lot of moving parts there. And I don't want to, we're not quite sure how that can all work, but we're looking at options. I emailed out Katie from the downtown had suggested, which was great, let's reach out also to the other communities in the state, which I've done just in the last day to see how some of them are navigating this. Some of them are already, obviously, a lot of them are not set up the way we are. So they've got other ways they're doing it, but still there are some that have different arrangements. And so we've asked them for input as well. So we're collecting that information right now to bring to you as part of that conversation. So I've shared information and talked, like I said, with the districts about kind of how this might look, but not knowing exactly. And obviously the council ultimately with your sections in your code and with legal, guidance and stuff will have to kind of make the final decision. So I didn't want to get too far over my skis or with them, but I know there's a lot of concern because there's things that will be impacted depending on how the funding would flow and how some of those arrangements would be done. So with that, happy to try to answer a few questions. Andy, obviously, and Chris and others can chime in, and then you have the districts here as well represented.
Very good, Wyatt. Thank you. Anything else, Andy, before we go to questions?
No, I think the only thing I wanted to add to Wyatt's comments were, ultimately whatever comes from that decision and the discussion related to the state law here could potentially result in some changes in the budget. And so that partly being why it's fitting, just to make you alert and aware of that. And then obviously the topic is the TIF districts and it's very germane to that as well. So just wanted to highlight that. But other than that, Mayor, no.
Very good.
I'm sorry, how would it change the budgets?
Potentially if there's no MOUs anymore, or, how they change. I think there's a possibility. I couldn't necessarily envision what that change might be, but I think there's just some possibility there.
I started before we went clockwise. Let's start right and go counterclockwise. Councilmember Rowan?
Thanks, Mayor. Andy, I think the only question I have is, in your conversations with the various districts, do they understand we're gonna do a preliminary and then a final budget approval? I know
No.
that's weird to ask that way.
Yeah,
but-
probably. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Wyeth's on top of it.
Okay.
So,
I just want to make sure that, because they're not so much in the city apparatus, that there's gonna be a longer conversation this year.
yeah. That I did not make them aware of that, but Wyeth he's doing a very good job always. Yeah.
Thank you, Wyatt. Good job. Okay, Scott?
Thanks, and I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure how the heck I missed it for 2 years now until Councilwoman Owen pointed it out. Do we put entitlement share into these TIF districts?
So each of the 3 districts get an entitlement share, but it is directly for that district. And I think the reason for most, or if not all of it, when the legislature makes changes to business equipment tax, they backfill with entitlement share, and a portion of increment is business equipment tax related. And so they send a separate payment. This is for the east tax increment district. This is for the downtown. It is not a portion that we get to the city and we allocate. Yes, it is not in there. But yes, there is a state entitlement share that goes to the district.
So follow up.
Sure.
I presume then, if we removed the entitlement share, we would have to distribute that out proportionately out to the other impacted districts. Is that accurate?
To the taxing jurisdictions,
Right.
I would assume that that is true. It is, I think as far as the state's concerned, it's increment revenue. It's replacing increment revenue that we lost in prior years.
Have a debt. And so, in repaying that debt, the state is pretty careful that when it changes tax code, tax law, that they don't leave a jurisdiction somewhere in a position where they can't pay that debt that they committed to. So I suspect, I can't say with certainty, but I suspect that's why there's been an extremely consistent approach from the state of Montana relative to sharing, as Andy said. They lower business equipment tax or some other formula. They're making sure they're not causing a default at the local level.
So one last follow-up, and I'm not gonna monkey with this as we're gonna get into work sessions coming later, but one of the things as we get into those work sessions that I'd like to know from you and Wyeth as you're having these conversations, we're gonna talk about it, is what's the proportionate distribution if we were to take these entitlement shares away? What comes into the city? What kicks out to the school district and what kicks out to the county? Because frankly, unless we're going to jeopardize debt service, which I don't think we are in any of these cases or situations, I don't see why we're lumping entitlement share here when our increment districts are growing fairly well. And even if this is a third across the board, that's $330,000 into the city. And I'm certain that the school district and the county could figure a place for that as these increments continue to grow. So that'll be something I'll certainly want to know and have a conversation about when we talk about this stuff later in July. We don't need to mess with it today, but that's something that I'm going to want to have a clearer picture on, please.
Absolutely.
TJ, anything?
maybe a follow-up for Scott's question then. But it sounds like the state allocation distribution, it's not something that the city just goes, do we decide on it? We don't, or do we have a decision point on that, or is it just automatically go back?
So the state law allows for a district to make a distribution to the taxing jurisdictions from its increment revenue. That would be the tax revenue and the entitlement share. But there's, I think as Scott's indicating or alluding to, that the distribution is proportionate to all taxing jurisdictions. I don't know that we've ever done that in Billings. There are other jurisdictions in the state of Montana that do that. But you could take an approach to take X number of dollars from any district and distribute it proportionately. That authority exists. We don't have a past practice in Billings of doing that I'm aware of.
Mr. Mayor.
So
Go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
so it wouldn't be directly. It could be indirectly done in terms of, but I guess my concern is that I mean, I think the main place that'd be coming out of is the potential for development matches, and that brings in a lot of private money that we want to see continue to be invested into those districts. So we'll have to look at it.
Yeah, and Ed, I completely appreciate that perspective, and hell, my company leans into these increments on projects that we work for clients, and I'm 100% sensitive to that. However, I'm 100% sensitive to the fact that we're going to have $1.8 million deficit next year, that we're going to be looking at cuts to services, and we got to find that somewhere. We got to find portions of that somewhere. And if 20 to 25% of that can come from a reduction in what we match private investment with, and that saves us from reducing services in one of public safety or some other area in the city, the library or the Met or parks, I think that is absolutely a conversation that needs to be on the table, because we don't have. There's not a lot more juice to squeeze out of this turnip, and we got to be looking at all things. And this is one of the least impactful to Joe bag of donuts at the grocery store. In reality, it might not be favorable, and we don't have to do it every year, but I think we have to have it on the table as we're looking at another $1 million+ deficit coming next year. It's certainly something that we got to look at as far as what part or portion of that can we make up through distributions out of these TIF districts that are doing well.
Okay, could you go in if Councilmember Gillick, you're done. Anything, Bill, or?
Yes. Andy, we have, looking at the increment funds, operation and maintenance, we have a pretty sizable amount for the operation and maintenance. Do we have a breakdown of what the operation maintenance is? Because looking at the total 3 districts, it's about 5.2, almost 5.3 million for O&M. So with that, is for this July meeting, you think we could have that?
So that's what these slides are here. The debt payment obviously is debt service. Largely everything else is O&M except for the 29 million for capital for the rec center. I guess there's 150,000 between the other 2 districts, but this is the breakdown here, and there's each slide there for one for each district.
Okay, so when I look at this, just the bird operating agreement, 179,750. Is that for staff and rent and all of that?
Are you-
I'm just
Oh.
looking at the east.
So
that you got.
the O&M here includes the city's cost allocation charge, the payments to each of the districts, and then the bulk of it are the development incentives. That's what the bulk of it is. Are you asking for a breakdown on the
Expenditures, yeah.
the allocation to each district? Like in this case, the allocation to Bird, or something more? I mean,
I just like to, if you look at that, the debt payment goes for whatever we have bonded out,
Mhm.
cost allocation, what that actually goes to. Operating agreement, what it actually pays for. Does it pay the city? Does it pay for an employee? Does it pay for rent? What does that pay for? And then development incentives, is that development incentives? Is that goes back to incentives to the businesses for developing?
Exactly.
Okay. I would just like a better way of looking at each of those to see how the money is actually spent.
Okay, I can work with the districts. They
That's great.
have provided information on their operating agreements. The cost allocation, a portion of it goes to the general fund to primarily cover finance administration costs, and then the
Okay.
portion of it goes to planning to cover Wyeth's costs.
Okay. I'd like to see those.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tom, anything? Denise, anything?
No, yeah, I just want to make sure that we start those meetings early in July so we can start this because it's about the TIF. And this is really more for
Oh, this
Wyeth.
is on Wyeth.
Yeah,
Okay.
Wyeth, it's more to Wyeth. So just make sure we start early July in those meetings to start talking about what the plan's going to be on moving the TIF district. So thank you.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. Wyatt, just one quick one. And when we have our meetings, would this be the time to conceivably talk about merging some of these TIFs together? So under one leadership versus two or three, and then having that person work here at the city kind of thing?
Councilmember Boyette, and Mayor and Council, I mean, I think the whole conversation is looking at how would we work this? I mean, there's the advisory board piece and having, continuing if the council's deciding, we're going to still have 3 advisory boards for each district, which, has some logic to it in terms of how we've been doing things and having that experience from those districts. But in terms of then how applications and that stuff flows through and to the city council, I mean, those are all things, that we'd have to talk about. And that's what you're describing as one potential way or a way to do that. If I could just say one thing just to make sure, because this is all getting recorded. I don't want to misunderstand what Councilmember Kennedy said, but he mentioned something about a $5 million total. And I believe what was being referenced is if you take all 3 operation budget amounts, it's about it's over $600,000 of the 3, just not 5 million. But I just wanted to clarify that there is an amount for each one.
If you would look at the line for the O&M, you go across, all the way across is 5.2, almost 5.3.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, so you're looking at that total. I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding it for the operations, what's going to each district for their operations.
Yeah.
So you're looking at just
Yeah, it says operations and
Okay.
maintenance, and then I just went all the way across and the total for the 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The bulk of that is development incentives to development. Yep.
I'm just going to comment on the last topic, and then I'll give a quick question. Other cities, some other cities, I think, or 1 or 2, have centralized this in the city. That's more efficient, I assume, and they handle multiple districts. The disadvantage of that is I don't think they get the buy-in from the community that we've had by having 3 independent boards with business people out there hustling business in their district. So there's no perfect answer, but there's advantages both ways. What would be a shame, I think, was if we had now three new committees that satisfy the state law, and we had still the three committees, the independent committees. So now we got six. I think it would just, it would be mind-boggling difficult to do something like that. So anyway, hopefully there'll be a solution. But I do see the advantage, even if there's consolidation into a single entity, having subcommittees that are representative of the businesses and the individuals in each district, so that there's plenty of grassroots input into the process. But that's a comment. My question is on the revolving fund, the smallest of all of these. Did you say, Andy, that the maximum grant is 250 or loan is $250,000? I think the other issue there that's maybe not being used is just not worth it. The amount of effort that goes into getting that loan for $250,000 would be the same as the amount of loan if it were, $2.5 million or 25 million. What's the process for increasing that? Do you think it's too low? Do we need to look into the process of raising it? When was it last raised, if ever?
So that very well could be the limitation. I'd honestly probably talk to Mamet. He initially fields those applications or queries of interest. You guys review the ordinance on the revolving loan within the last 3 or 4 years, and the decision at that time was to keep it at 250. There was a discussion at raising it. Certainly could go back and revisit that. As far as I know, the max has been 250, probably, well, for at least a decade. I've been here that long. So yeah, I guess that's the answer to your question about the history of the 250. I don't know, Mamet, if you're aware that that's the limitation. The process for pursuing it, you're probably right. Whether you're pursuing a grant for 10,000 or 250, we generally require the same information.
Okay, Mamet, you want to comment on that question?
Happy to. Yeah, Mayor and Council, thank you for the question. My experience is actually not the maximum amount that intrigues people, or even the interest rate too. I know it's higher than it used to be, but what I've seen on the ground is that there is a preference slightly toward the SBA loans, because I can't remember if it's the 504 or the 702, but one of them requires 10% down instead of 20, and our program requires 20%. And so when they have to compare the two, they see the preference there. The other challenge we've seen in the recent applications is that they've tended to be restaurant operators, and that always, as we know, comes with a high risk. And so sometimes it's a little bit more involved in trying to prove that they're going to be able to make their payments. So those are the two things that I've seen.
All right, thank you for that information. I guess my comment is, if the money is not being used, we're not doing something right, and we ought to make changes to the system until we are using that. It doesn't cost us anything just to have that money out there being used, assuming there's no bad debt. So, okay, we've gone around the table, and I think that then concludes our discussion on TIF districts. Councilor Essler.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, for bringing that up, because that was one question that I had forgotten. And I guess my question, Andy, is where did the funding that created that revolving loan come from? And where would it go back to if we got rid of it?
Yeah, so when the original downtown TIF district sunset, the funds were used from there. And since then, it's just been a revolving fund of payments back in.
So then my follow-up to that is, where would it go if we got rid of it? I presume that it would go back out proportionately to the districts.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Can we follow up on that when we have this discussion in July? On this one in particular, if we got rid of it, where would the money go?
I will seek to find an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike?
And then from the banking standpoint, what's the history of this? Have we ever made a loan? How many loans have we made? What's the delinquency rate? is it really worth having this amount of money if we don't lend it out? I mean, there's a lot of, why have it if we're not doing it in a routine business?
Yeah, we do have active loans outstanding at this point in time. We have had one default. That was the Petroleum Club. There is a restaurant that recently closed downtown that has an outstanding balance, but it is not in default currently. But yeah, there are loans outstanding, and many of them are current and or frequently paid off in advance. Yep.
Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll move on to our fire department presentation. Chief Hopple. Thank you, everybody.
One second, chief.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, I'll get it up and going for you. Probably. I'll get up out of the seat here for you, too. This one here? Can I put it into the folder? That way they have a copy of it? I was just thinking, then there's a copy of it.
Lost half
Yeah, what?
the crowd. So bad, all those TIF people, they might want to actually say something, but we opened it up. They know where we are. They can find us.
Forgot which one. Do you know what the difference is? I don't know. I'll open up the right one. Hang on.
That's okay, Chief. We've got it memorized.
We're so close right now. All right. He's modified slightly for your viewing pleasure.
Oh, yeah, they were in our.
Okay, welcome, Chief Hopple. We're missing a few people, but they'll be back. So why don't you keep moving? That'd be great.
I can do that. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for hearing the fire department budget tonight and helping us weather this storm that we're in right now. Obviously pretty new to the position and kind of inherited this, so hopefully I can answer your questions tonight. I can just guarantee that if I can't, I will get you an answer. So just kind of want to quickly go over our, as we do, you know, we all have a mission vision statement. Billings Fire Department dedicated to utilizing the latest. Should have this memorized. Perfect. Education methods and technology and providing outstanding fire rescue and EMS services to our valued citizens and those that visit our community. On the vision statement, being the Billings Fire Department aspires to be the finest provider of fire rescue and EMS services with the state of the region, within the state and region through calculated planning, training, and implementation of service delivery needs. And of course, our motto, our family serving your family. I won't read these. Obviously, you know what we do, but just kind of, we are an all hazards response. You know, we do still call ourselves a fire department, but obviously we do a little bit of everything. That's transitioned over the years from early 70s when all we did was go to fires and realize we could do a whole lot more because there was just nobody doing it in the community. So we've stepped up and keep adding things to our agenda. And at some point, you know, we got to decide, you know, can we keep doing it based on budget, or or what do we need to look at there? The last thing that says whatever else we may need, we're kind of the catch-all, so call us, try to figure it out. We will figure it out, but we try to just figure out what it takes to take care of any additional problems. We're pretty task saturated right now, so that last statement just kind of refers to we'll get you an answer, try to help you out and figure out how we work through other hazards that exist in the community. We still have cats in trees, other things in trees, but just a little bit of everything. It's over my 28 years, we've seen a lot of different things, and just happy that we are able to help in all these different things that we do. But obviously, it does take a toll on budgets, so just recognizing that we are not just an entity that fights fires. I'm not moving.
First time to see
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, now
All right.
we can get rid of the IT department. We got Andy.
Exactly.
Think all the money we can save.
Did have a request to kind of go over some of our calls for service and revisit that. I did go back the 5 years. I would steer you, like St. John said last night, to our annual reports. I do have an archive if you guys need to look at other ones, but I kind of want to give you that 5-year perspective on our calls for service. And as you look at this, and we start at 2020 and go through 2024, kind of see some ups and downs. We had an increase in 2022, and then we've seen a slight decrease in 2023. And what that was about the time we started to implement, work with our local ambulance provider on these low acuity calls, basic ambulance service where we don't go on those calls. So that's where we've seen the decrease in that year. And then moving into 2024, we start to see that uptick again that we see across the board. And just going back to the annual report, I just read this so it kind of makes sense. We have two different ways of looking at data. One of it is just strictly how many responses we went to or were called to, how many incidents we went to, and then how many apparatus we sent to those. So looking at that, just a reminder that total apparatus refer to the number of units deployed for all calls of service. That's not what's on here. So the total apparatus runs 22,472 represent a decrease from 3.5% from 2023, which had 23,280 runs. But what this piece of information mean, in 2023, there were about 18,810 calls for service and a total of 23,289 units deployed. So obviously multiple units being dispatched to these calls. While in 2024, there were 19,342 calls for service and a total of 22,472 units deployed. Really, it suggests an increase in those low acuity calls, and we just kind of want to keep an eye on that trend. If that trend continues, we're probably looking at deploying more MRTs, which kind of I look at in the 5-year projections that I'll show you later in this. So those MRTs, obviously, we want going on those lower acuity calls, and then that lowers our total apparatus response. Kind of breaking this down a little bit further. So, we've always said EMS is a majority of what we do. You can see that uptick in the EMS. I put rescue in there because too many times we assume an EMS call is just that single unit response to a house or what it be. And really, an EMS call could be a rescue. It can be a RIM rescue. Any time that somebody's hurt and needs EMS assistance. So that does require more resources to be sent to those type calls. So obviously, it's not just that single call to a resident. So we call it EMS rescue. 2024, we saw about 10,221 of those. Our fires, this is historically, even over my entire career, stay the same. There's years that it decreases, years that it goes up, but anywhere in that 400 to high 300 area is what we're seeing in fires. Feels like we're going to go past that this year. We're seeing a big uptick for whatever reason. In some structure fires, had a lot this past week. So, and then anything other of that total would fall into the other calls for service. Anything else that we're called to outside of a fire call. EMS rescue, all those other things that we respond to and help the public with. So, and I can break that down further, follow up on that if you'd like to see. I'm really excited about data. Pulling data right now has been very difficult with an INFIRS system. It's a very archaic system that we use to report our incidents. We are transitioning. It's actually going out of service at the end of this year. It was a grant-funded program that UL had studied, and it's going to be much more user-friendly, a live dashboard that you can look at any time about what's happening in Billings, what our threats are in this community, what type of calls we're going to, and we can pull data off of that system much easier. So if you email me, I could probably have you an answer in 10 minutes of what's actually happening in our city and what we need to look at, where our high target areas are, where our target hazards are, all of that, where our trends are. You know, historically, we've had to look back and wait for a year to see a report to see what that looks like. So excited about that. I talk about a little bit about that going forward. And this is just breaking down our MRTs, call for service. So if you look at Squad 1, that is our first MRT that went into service, obviously at the end of 2022. Took quite a bit of calls in 2023, but that's at the time that it was co-housed at Station 6. So those units kind of went together while we figured the system out a little bit better. So you see a little bit higher call volume. And then when we moved that unit over to the new Station 8, and they're taking their own service areas, and we split those up, those come down and then evenly distributed to cover the heights. So that's where that went down. And then Squad 2, that kind of covers our west end and anywhere else it needs to go, is really getting hammered pretty hard. Obviously implemented mid-2023, and you can see that 2,835 calls in 2024. That's a pretty busy unit. That's probably one of our busiest units in the city, in addition to the other runs that Engine 5 runs out of that station. So those people are running and gunning to handle calls, but you got to figure out where that threshold is to start breaking that down a little further and having more effective response times and consider adding MRTs in the future. This is probably a hot topic tonight. At least I've been told that. So we will dig into it a little bit. I just kind of want to preempt it. And then I have Chief Banfield here to explain some. I know there's some budget questions last night that existed with that on some grant funding, but obviously not fully operational right now, but just to give you some insight of what's happening. We do have one crew EMT that we still employ and is doing some limited, I say limited case management because they are not a mental health worker, but he is an EMT. He understands the process and what we're looking for. So he's spending various hours per week on chronic callers. So work specific to chronic callers costs, using him about $13,928. That's considering his entire wage package is $38 an hour. One engine response to those same callers would cost us about $380 an hour, and that is with personnel on board. So you can see it's slightly less or slightly more, or slightly less for an MRT to respond to those calls. And one caller accounted for 138 or 39 calls for service in the last 6 months. So I only bring this case out because this is where the impact happens. I'm not going to give the address, but it is one specific address that we responded to, and that caller cost the city about $54,000 in 6 months, going back to the wages units that it cost to send to that call. That is just fire. The last 3 months, we've had 5 calls for service to this address. So we went from 139 in 6 months to 5. And this is the work that he is doing. He's going out there, and he's not doing mental health work out there, but he's going out there trying to get resources for them. He's identifying other community resources that can help these people, getting them in contact with that, figuring out what's happening inside that house, not from a mental health perspective, but there's other things that work into that. So we've kept him on to do this work until we can figure out how to get these units functional. And we can only imagine the short time we had it, but if he can do that as one EMT, what we can do to curb the rest of the high utilizer calls that happen in the city. So I don't know if you want to wait till the end to discuss kind of the funding piece of it.
But why don't we get to the end?
Sure.
Then we'll
Right.
have questions, I'm sure.
So looking at our budget, really status quo from our previous year. Really, the only change you see in there, is through vacancy savings, and that would be in administration, because we are not going to fill the other assistant chief's position or whatever that be. Whatever happens with the interim chief, obviously, we'll see what happens there. But our prediction, we would not refill that position if we promote an assistant chief into the chief's position. Don't want to lose that position. I don't like the fact that we're losing it. It's actually the position that I work in, and there's a lot of work that we'll have to divvy out between the rest of us, but I don't want to lose anybody on the street. People on the street make a big difference, and monitor our budget throughout the year and see if maybe we can get that position back. But for now, to deal with the budget deficit we're in, that's really where we're going to see some vacancy savings. Obviously, we'll see some other vacancy savings and suppression. I was so proud to say that at the end of June, we would have a full staff, and we've already lost 2. And they're not tenured employees. They're new employees that are going back home. We were talking about some reasons last night. But younger employees that are following their spouses or wanting to go back where they came from. So unfortunately, we have already lost those 2 in addition to Chief Valdez. But and we anticipate we'll lose a couple more by the end of the year. So we will see some vacancy savings there, because it's not fiscally responsible to run a 2-person academy or even a 4-person academy. Our magic point would be about a 6-person academy to be fiscally responsible to do that. And if we get to that 6 number by springtime, we would be looking at filling those positions, because what happens, the other bad word in the room, overtime. So we want to make sure that we try to stay fully staffed as much as we can. So that whole public safety total, 181.3. Now we look at the state 911 fund. I know there was some questions about, digging a little deeper into what the 911 budget looks like, and I'd be more than willing to give some more insight into that. But so the state 911 fund, where that money comes from is our phones that are in the city. So that's a grant fund that continually gets to be replenished after we use it. We can only use it on certain items. In this case, we use it to fund 1.3 positions, and what that is, one of it, the full-time position is the assistant manager of the center, and then the other third is 1/3 of the communication equipment tech that you see up top. We fund 1/3 of it, the grant funds 1/3 of it, and then the police department funds 1/3 of his position, and that's Joan Christensen. He handles anything radio within our department, so he's a huge asset to us to try to keep us being able to talk to each other. So gives us a strength of going from 183.6 to 182.6. The operating budget just kind of broken down a little bit further. 82% goes to personnel, operations and maintenance, and that's anything operations and maintenance within the fire department. So it's a pretty big category, 3.4 million. Capital is some additional items that we'll be asking for this year. I can break that down a little bit further, but you'll see 995,000 into capital. What we're looking at there, and just want to briefly go over it, is some defibrillators that we need to purchase. Station 5 is going to need some significant fixes, not facelift, but actual infrastructure fixes. We have the Station 2 boiler that we went out and did some contract work for to get some heat back at Station 2. We are limping it along. We are looking at looking into Station 1's remodel and what needs to be done there. There's not a lot of efficiency that we don't have there right now. It's been a long time since we've done any type of upkeep to that. So then Station 6, we do have a drainage problem. It's been a long-term problem. I think it's been here as long as I've been here, but I think we need to address it. And what it is, water gathers in the corner of the parking lot. For anybody that's driven by there, we want to look into fixing that drainage. And then for a fire truck, it's kind of a combination purchase, and I'll discuss that a little bit further in my slide of what that actually is. Transfers is just our money that we put into the ERP, TRP, And we also have for the equipment replacement fund, that's obviously our rolling stock. The technology replacement fund there's a lot of technology that exists in the 911 center and the fire department. And then the last thing is we have a new fund that some of our higher dollar safety items, such as our air packs that we have, pretty significant purchase when we have to do those every 15 years. And then we've rolled our defibrillators into that so we can fund those going into the future. But for now, we have to do a quick fix, and that's going to be an additional budget request this year for a total budget of $29,075,000. Kind of broken down a little bit further, you can see our administration budget from 2025 to now went down pretty significantly. And what that is we had a long tenured administrative 4 position that was in there that retired. Was higher pay rate, had a lot of cash out when they went out. We've since then went to 2 admin 3s in the front office, so that did save us some money. We had some consultation fees within that budget, so we have a lot of different cloud-based platforms that we use that existed in the administrative budget. We strictly moved those into training, and that's kind of our records management system and our learning management platform. Just moved out of admin into that line item, and then also, of course, the assistant chief vacancy savings out of that. Prevention investigation, we did see it go down. And that is because we had a fire protection engineer last year budgeted in there, and that has since moved into the building department. So we have a decrease in that budget. And then we also had, we went up and cleaned up some of our pay codes. We have employees that move in between divisions, and when they were being paid out of a different division because they didn't get recoded. So we were able to identify that and lower that a little bit further and move it back to the correct location, not being overpaid, just being paid out of the wrong line item. Training, you see, goes up a little bit, and basically we had to increase some overtime in that position because we have an on-call safety officer now, and they're a health safety officer. They're not just responding to calls; they're taking care of all of our exposures, anything that happens on our calls from start to finish. We had a big lack in that system, so employees that were needed help to run through that system. Now we have a safety officer, extra set of eyes on scene on some of our larger incidents. We didn't have a budget to help pay for some of that when they get called out. So did transfer some money into there. Equipment maintenance, that's something that changes every year. So when we look at that, it's not going up. It is going up $300,000, but it's for different things. So when we look at that, we go back into what we're asking for in some of our capital items. The defibrillators, Station 5, all the stuff that we identified in capital exists in that. Suppression is mainly your cost of living increase in that, the 3% that we had in our CBA. Crisis response, same thing, cost of living was the increase there. That is still funding too, but we do have some vacancy savings there that we're looking at for the one that we don't have hired right now to help this budget. The 911 center, you saw a drastic increase there. And what that is historically last year we pulled vacancy savings out of that budget because we just saw that we weren't going to be able to hire our employees in that. So we don't want to think that way this year. We need to get that center back up and functioning to its full capacity. And we also looked at some historical overtime projections just because of the lack of being fully staffed. That's where you see the increase there. We put the vacancy savings back into that as well as the overtime predictions that are more in tune with what we're seeing as trends. And then communication equipment, that changes a little bit every year. Obviously, our technology changes. So we've identified that's what we're going to need this year to support the technology that exists in 911. Again, bringing us to the $29,075,000. Allocation, where are our resources? 75% of them are out on suppression. And when I say suppression, that doesn't mean just fires. It's everything our trucks do out in the field. So 75% of our personnel are dedicated suppression, about 13% to 911, training 2%. There's 3 individuals that exist in there. And then prevention, the fire marshal's office, and then admin, 5%. All right, overtime. Just want to show you what we're doing with overtime. And it's working. So hopefully it continues to work and we can put some minds at rest compared to what we spent this year. So we're looking at fiscal year 25, probably going to be in that area, $1.4 million in overtime. We hired 24 employees in this fiscal year, 2 sets of 12 recruits. So during the times that we were down those employees, if you look back kind of historical in that fiscal year, 7/1 of 24, we're seeing per pay period overtime costs pretty dang high as far as my career goes. So up to 80 to 120, 107 during the summer months. But keep in mind, during the summer months, we were short those 12 people, but at the same time, we also have some wildland deployments that we go on. And those individuals are paid overtime when they go out on those, but we are reimbursed dollar for dollar. And that doesn't go directly back into that budget. So it does come back into the general fund, but it's not reflected in our overall budget when we bring that in. So that's the increased cost during summer. And then also we have an additional vacation slot because of how many people we have. There's not enough slots in there for everybody to take the allocated vacation they get each year. So we always see that increase during the summer months. We hope to not see that this year. In fact, I can almost guarantee you, unless we have a mass exodus going into it, the trend is showing pretty good. So you'll see it starts to go down a little bit. We hired the people in September, the 12, and then as you look when they came online, right at the end of November, right after Thanksgiving, the second those 12 went online, our overtime went from 87,000 per pay period to 31. So that is a direct impact when we don't have the people on the street. That's the only way to bring our staffing up is through overtime. So stayed pretty consistent through that, but we were still had some retirements in December that we had to deal with, and we are currently down another 12. We are just finishing up Recruit Academy with them, so we anticipate that once they go online at the end of June, we hope to see that go down even a little bit further. So we going from $1.4 million overtime budget, fiscal year 26 ask is $583,000. So significant decrease in our ask there. But as I spoke of, we do see unforeseen retirements, unforeseen resignations. So we just need to keep an eye on that. And I'm in full support of Councilman Aspenleiter's. Keep you guys in the loop if we see a trend that is going to fall outside that $583,000 that we come in and keep ahead of that with the council. So with that, that's what we've done with overtime. Some of our highlights from fiscal year 25, our remodel is obviously complete at Fire Station 8. It houses Squad 1 right now, so they run out of there. Annual training with the National Guard, you see a little bit of that. That's paying some dividends for our personnel, getting some experience on some of that different type of rescue, but it's a great relationship. I see some benefit in it in the long term as we build these relationships as they get their facility up on the hill. I think that's where we see our part and our payback from a training standpoint, and some resources that they'd like to see give to us in response to us giving them a paramedic for when it's needed. Not used very often, but when it is, it's highly appreciated because they don't have paramedics on their helicopters, and so we have them here, so it's a good opportunity to train and help that situation out. Officer development, engineer development program, I put these in there. You probably see them every year. The importance of that is we have a high C program. So when we put individuals through officer development, engineer development, it prepares them for their next step. It also puts them in a position that when we have shortcomings in a captain's level, or we have shortcomings in an engineer level, we're able to bump people up rather than hire overtime. So the deeper we have individuals trained when it comes to working in these positions, we have people on the bottom, but when we can't move people up, we end up in an overtime situation. So we stay on top of those programs. We just finished up an engineer development program, and officer development program next, and also battalion chief development program. We have installed new radio systems in the stations to support quicker station alerting. That was one of the CPSM recommendations. We are working through fine tuning that and hope to report back to you that we have reduced those response times. There's just some other caveats that we have identified that play into response times and call processing, and we're working through that through some of our protocols now, and I can talk about that here in just a minute. Some of the other highlights: squad units, MRT, obviously showing positive impacts. We do have a new medical director that is very active with the department. That's huge because it's helping us move our paramedics our new paramedics that are getting trained and helping us, stay on top of anything we do EMS. We've had some past medical direction that wasn't very active, so paying dividends there. Continued refinements, this is what I just referred to the new protocol proximity dispatching. We see some benefits to proximity dispatching, and we also see some problems in it, so we're identifying the best way to implement that. And then protocol, making police and fire protocols work together. We're finding situations where they work through a police protocol and then identify late in the call that EMS is needed, and then we get dispatched, so you see a delay in the call processing. So working with our new 911 manager, who comes from law enforcement, I think we can get through that. Chief Banfield was just in there today working with them. So just continue to refine those. Enhancing our drone program. Drones are getting used more and more. We used them on a pretty big deal this weekend, and or last Thursday, I should say. Just through joint efforts through police and fire, we've combined forces and help each other out when it comes to using drones for whatever reason we need to use them for, whether it's a fire, a rescue, or an operation that they have going on in the police department. We do have a spot medic program now, and really for police, it's showing some positive impact. We did utilize them on an operation that we had last week on South 27th. And what that is in the past, they've just really had no resource if something were to happen during those operations. We have a medic right there to treat, whether it be citizens or the actual officers that are involved in the operation. So ongoing annual training, we have 3 individuals that are doing that, so it's showing some impact. Just continue to evaluate that. And obviously the Recruit Academy back-to-back deliveries, 12 and 12, that we did over fiscal year 25. So going into our additional funding request, this type 1, type 3, we like to call it, partially ERP funded. And what I mean by that, we're looking at the truck's pictured there. It's a similar type truck. It's right now in the ERP, we have $242,000 to replace a white van. We call it, used to be a hazmat rig, but since we took over the state stuff, we really haven't used it for that since then. But it's up for replacement. So using funding from that, and then in turn, we would donate that vehicle to the police department, so it would help their operation. Helps us too, because when we build that base station for these drone operations, because right now we've got drone stations everywhere, put it under one vehicle, it's a turnkey operation. They show up and operate drones. But so that vehicle that would go to PD that we'd normally sell at auction would go to PD, so they benefit off of that. And then we would need an additional $300,000. These trucks are running about half the cost of a frontline pumper. So when I say type 1, type 3, type 1 is our frontline apparatus. It's a fire pumper. Type 3, a little less capacity, more wildland focused. So this is a hybrid truck that, number one, because it's a type 1, if that's the vehicle we get, would support our fleet. We have a lot of times that we are completely down to 0 apparatus, reserve apparatus, because our fleet is getting worked on. As these trucks get more technologically advanced, we see a lot more downtime. So unfortunately, that stuff that's mandated, so we can't get around it. It's with new vehicles and the technology that's put up. So this would support that. Expedited build time. So right now, obviously, we paid for a pumper 2 years ago. 2 years to wait to even get it. So 4 years is what the time frame is on a $1.2 million truck that we bought. These are about a 6-month build time. So it gives us a piece of apparatus that we can deploy. It's better for wildland urban interface. If we haven't looked around and the belt loop and stuff, we're getting into these areas. This type of truck is much more accessible and obviously makes more sense to use in those types of situations. We're seeing a big increase in wildland California and some of the stuff that's happening there. It has some potential, you know, if we need to, if we lack funding in frontline apparatus that are 1.2, that we could possibly use it to staff a fire station in the future. So that is a benefit to it. Potential for revenue generation. The city of Missoula has been doing this for quite some time, and obviously with our budget shortfalls, I'd like to start exploring a little bit more revenue generation. So it does have that potential, and I'll show you that in the next slide. And then obviously I talked about PD. I would acquire the old vehicle that's being replaced out of the ERP. So this is just a little historical view of what Missoula's been doing. They created an emergency response fund, the revenue generation fund that this money goes into. So that top line is personnel. When we go out on a deployment, if we use that truck to go out on a deployment with our personnel on it, it's dollar for dollar matched on our personnel, so we don't lose any funding when it comes to personnel. We have to be fully staffed to do that. I don't want to cut the city short, but if we are fully staffed and we are able to deploy, that's something we could look at. That second line there is direct income from what they pay us for the apparatus. So when that truck goes out, they pay us by the hour, and that's where they bring revenue in. And the bottom line is obviously their overall fund that goes into their emergency fund. But like I said, dollar for dollar on top. Where that $778,000 comes from is a Chapter 50 in the interagency cooperative agreements that we have. So if you look at the type of reimbursement we get if we send a unit out, it can be state, it can be another state, as we've seen last year with California. We had a lot of Montana resources down there helping them out. You know, where does that benefit us? If we're ever in that situation, when we start to build these agreements, we can pull from that as well and use federal dollars to help us in any situation we get here. But the unoperated is what you want to focus on there. So the unoperated hourly rate, if it's fully operated, that's us putting our people on it, and they just pay us a package deal. So we focus on the unoperated. So that engine I just showed you can make anywhere from $200 an hour to $150 an hour based on a 16-hour day when it's being deployed. So if it's on a 14-day deployment, which is kind of common when they go out, it can be a significant way to bring revenue into the city. Obviously, it's wear and tear on our equipment, so it's not it's not $200 we got to take out. We have to do to take care of that apparatus. But just something I'd like to consider us looking into, and if it's feasible, to try to bring a little bit more revenue into the fire department's budget, just because we are pretty limited on what revenue we do bring in outside of property taxes. Just an option for us if we were to purchase that type of vehicle. I'm going to let Chief Banfield dig into this one. So this is the Zoll monitors, and it's a $300,000 one-time request, and it has to deal with some technology we have inside of our EMS. It is a boom box.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
No, not just one. That's not for one.
I'll sell you mine from 1989 for a lot less than that. Chief Banfield, welcome to the table, quite literally. So,
Thanks. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Tell us about Zoll monitor replacement.
So over the past about 7 years, we've moved forward in the ALS delivery of ALS services. We're running about 32 to 34 paramedics now on the job. We're probably the highest paramedic employer at the state at this time. That delivery of service, though, comes with the cost for the equipment that comes with it. These are the national standards, and when we use those LifePak 15 monitors, they do have a shelf life. And so currently 9 of those monitors and 3 of them are at the end of their life, and they're not able to maintenance. So what that means for us is delivering of the shock or the pacing or said it doesn't meet FDA compliance at this point or won't. We've limped them along. We've purchased a ton of those through grants in the past, and we tried to build the TRP over time and to match what we thought was going to be the cost of service as we move forward. So, the technology is changing also, and so moving from LifePak to Zoll, it's part of a system with our AutoPull system, and that AutoPull system is basically a squeezing mechanism that keeps your blood pressure and your systolic and diastolic pressures up during CPR and has a much higher survivor rate and better outcomes for our patients. We are now in Billings, we've met the national average just by implementing 2 of these in our community. And so I'm hoping to exceed that as we move forward, adding more of this type system. The new generational life packs, they're about 75 grand. These Zols are around 50,000, so they're less. And the hardware hasn't changed on them. There may be a change here in the future, but typically if they do that, they give us a trade-in value. And at that point, more than likely they do what's a software upgrade. So it is cheaper for us to move to this model. And request supports this phase out of the LifePak, process in place. Our emergency equipment replacement fund has been supporting this, but it hasn't been matching, the increased costs that we're starting to see across medicine. So that's kind of where we're at. We've asked for the initial about 300 grand to push us across the finish line to get this and then build out so that about every 5 to 7 years we can purchase these and keep that moving forward. We have looked at the leasing option because we all know that equipment changes so much and it's basically the same price or more. So we don't get the trade-in value then if the new model comes out. So I know it's a lot of money to move these forward. And we are also always looking for grant funding every time. We've contacted both hospitals or the Helmsley grant in the past, what we've used. So we are still searching we still may be able to find some dollars to offset that. But this would be the maximum purchase for this year.
Okay, back to Chief. Go ahead.
And this is just going into the grant discussion. We are getting very aggressive with searching for grants. We have been working with Amanda Stone Rock as well. We do have an agreement with her to help us out with some of this. So these are just some of the ones that we've identified. Some we've applied for, and the list is quite greater than this now because we continue to identify, and we're just going to go after grants anywhere we can. Obviously, it helps our budget when we can do that. But finding those grants and applying for those grants, being that we do have some vacancy savings with the one for the city, we figured going with Amanda Stone Rock is who we're using. We can use her as needed, and it wouldn't be that full-time position. So, and that exists within our budget. So these are just some of them. By far, not all of them. I just wanted to show you that, what kind of programs those would support. You can see that on there. I won't read those line for line, but we got all kinds of different things that we can use them for to support some of the operations I talked about earlier. So there's not so much a hit to our budget when it comes to onboarding some of this stuff. So our goals going into 2026, number one goal is, I think we need to begin, this is something that's long overdue, begin drafting a comprehensive strategic plan and a standards of cover. It's kind of a joint venture between those two things. But that strategic plan we've always seen as a monetary value, and you're going to see that at the end of my presentation. But I really think we need to have a third party come in and help us develop a good strategic plan based on the budget issues that we're having right now. So I've seen lots of different examples of them. I can provide that to you, what that actually looks at, but they do a deep dive in your organization. They utilize the CPSM study that we have. They utilize the SCI study that we did, and just kind of come up with a good plan for over that 5-year period, and they redo it every 5 years. But to figure out, rather than just keep coming to you each year with a pipe dream, is like, we want this, we want that. We just have a good plan based on, what shortfalls we see coming in these next years. So I'd like to get that done. I do have that listed out in that 5-year plan, and, looking for a very in-depth plan, you're looking about $70,000 to get a really good one that lays that out. But we can talk about that as we get into that. Again, we try to keep moving forward with obviously staffing Station 8, and I really think that the situation that we're in, a safer grant, is something that we really need to explore. Obviously, it's not a permanent fix, but safer grants, that is exactly what they're for. They're not for trying to maintain staffing, but add any additional staffing. You know, in the past, it was incremental. You got certain percentages, but a safer grant fully funds additional positions for 3 years. And then that gives us 3 years to figure out, are they making an impact? And if they are. So to continue going down that lane, obviously continue to pursue grant funding opportunities for all of our projects. Continue gathering data for the process of building Station 9. Obviously, that is part of the plan down the road, so explore funding for that as well. Same thing, using SAFER to possibly staff that, or other areas, grant funding to help building the station or co-locating with other departments, whatever that be. Battalion Chief Officer Development Program delivery, we are doing that this summer, so that gives us, again, another way to backfill that battalion chief when we have a shortfall there and don't have to pay overtime battalion chief wages. Identify gaps in the county-wide emergency response. We do have gaps in our county. If you're not aware of that yet, but we do have gaps out there. There's some areas that are uncovered. We want to identify what that is and work with the county to figure out what's the best way to deliver services out there. And I'm talking outside of BUFSA. We have areas that, you know, tie at the heartstrings when we get a life-saving call out in an area that's not covered, and, you know, we end up going. So I want to identify that, and if there's funding we can get back from that, or figuring out how to handle those areas and not just keep going out there for free. So identify those gaps. Continue monitoring, determine, you know, proper deployment of the MRTs, where we need to have those locations, how many. Feasibility charging for MVAs. This is something a lot of the organizations around us are doing, especially with an interstate system going through here. Our community neighbor here, Laurel, does it now. They have a billing partner that insurance does have a coverage within that will cover MVAs. We can get some cost recovery. Obviously, be careful of double taxation with services that we provide, but they've been very successful in trying to recover some of the costs that involve an MVA, because that's a lot of apparatus we send out on that, and the equipment we use for those calls is very expensive as well. So feasibility, what that looks like, we are working with city legal on that currently, so we hope to have an answer on what we can do there. We talked about earlier the new NERIS system, National Emergency Response Information System. That's that live system, and I can give you a presentation as we get closer to the date of implementation of that. And really, one of the biggest things is obviously our facilities, that comprehensive facility condition report. We do have a draft of that report, but we don't have numbers tied to it or financial pieces are tied to that. So once that's complete, I'd like to come back to you and show you kind of what our condition our facilities are in and what we need to probably start planning for over the next 5 years. I do have Tricia, who is our facility specialist and has been a godsend for our department in everything facility related, identifying and prioritizing what we need to work on. Obviously, that can change any given day. All of a sudden, we have no plumbing at Station 5 and we need to redirect our focus. But having that condition report is something we've never had in the past, and I think it's critical. And with her efforts, I think we can get there and identify where we need to put that in capital budgets. And last thing is, Chief St. John hit it on last night, but personal mental health, as calls increase and obviously violence increases in where any community, our personnel are exposed to a lot of different things, and we want to retain these personnel. So I'm pretty proud of the mental health support we have here with our department. We have a peer support program, but to focus on quality of life for our employees, and which helps their mental health, and hopefully they stick around more than 2 years, more than the 2 that we just lost. So I think that's a big piece that plays into that.
Chief, there's 10 more bullets under the goals for EMS. Don't want to shortcut EMS and 911, but you'll have to summarize some of those very quickly because we're getting long.
Real quick, updating the city EMS ordinance, pretty dated, so we are working with city legal to update that ordinance and how other agencies work in our community, and also pursuing agreements with AMR to get some cost recovery on services that we help them provide. So those are in the works right now, and I hope to come back to you and for approval of the agreements that we put in place there. Obviously identifying what we need to put in that technology replacement plan, so we're not coming back to you and asking for additional amounts like we did. Explore avenues and partnerships with crew, and mobile integrated health, which is that last piece of the TPSM study that we were doing. And again, charging for lift assist in not every single home, but in the places that are tasked and people pay to have those services, and we go out there and supplement that service. We want to figure out how we can get some cost recovery out of that. Center, obviously we have a new 911 manager, so onboarding them, continue to work through those protocols I talked about, reaching full staffing hopefully with our dispatchers, and then planning a backup emergency 911 site. We do not have that right now, so if we lose that site there, we need to have a backup plan for that, and then developing career path opportunities to keep our people around and hopefully want to work their way up in the 911 center. Their focus this next year. Really quick, this is our 5-year pipe dream. That's a lot of money we're looking at there, but as we look at that, fiscal year 27, all the personnel up top would be requested through safer funding. We need to eventually look at additional battalion if we start to open these stations because we are getting beyond our span of control. FTE for a training division, new apparatus, you can see the cost there. Maybe the apparatus that we buy will help us with that situation. Cardiac monitors is obviously in this fiscal year, an additional MRT vehicle to go along with the additional personnel we have up top, that apparatus I spoke of, and then the ongoing station renovations I have identified this year. That's what we're going to be spending. We do not have those projections yet going forward. As soon as that comprehensive plan is done, we will get to that. And that last piece, I talked about that strategic plan. I do have it in fiscal year 27. However, there may be some avenues. Hopefully we can get that pushed up so we can get going on what the fire department needs to do to grow. Last thing, just to close it up, obviously we're continuing to explore innovative ways to offset costs. The MBAs keep pace with the city's growth and response times. So as we grow, we want to make sure we're staying on top of that, honing, refining 911 dispatch, comprehensive plan, reevaluate fleet replacement. We're seeing our apparatus not lasting longer, so we need to get ahead of that. Continued efforts to address EMS delivery in our service area. We're doing through the agreements, and then additional report. Mental health, and the last thing I want to do is brown out a station. So trying to reduce or prevent any reduction in our response profile we have now because we're pretty task saturated, and I think it would just be a bad practice. I know it's not out of question to have to do, but I don't want to go there. So I want to do everything I can to prevent that. Questions?
Very good. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate all your detail there. There's a lot going, especially after only being on the job for a couple weeks. It's almost like you're a veteran, so it's amazing how you picked up all that coming from outer Mongolia or wherever you came from. Who has a birthday in June? Okay, we'll just start with Mr. Boyette here. Go ahead.
So quickly, how many people have we saved with this life pack? How important is these life packs? Give me some numbers. And if you're doing good, you need to do this more often.
Yeah, we're doing really well with that, and I can get you those saved numbers. We have an awards committee that we're pushing that, so I can get those to you. I don't have them with me tonight, but if you talk to any of the physicians in the ERs at this time, they really love that auto pulse and what it's doing for our community, especially the cardiac. And we sit on that cardiac board for both hospitals.
Then then Chief, does the BUSFA pay you directly or does that go into the general fund?
Does the
BUSFA, does that go into your budget?
It goes into our budget.
It does, so you're getting reimbursed right away for that.
I think it was 2.6 million. Go ahead.
Yeah, so BUFSA, we charge them annually and they split the payments, I think in December and June or something like that. But yeah,
So then the last thing is, one of the reasons I ran for city council is because there's a nursing home down the street. There's 15 big giant fire trucks there. Now we have a little red SUV. So with that little SUVs doing 2,000 to 4,000 calls, that should reduce the mileage on the great big red fire truck.
It has a.
So can the big red fire trucks last another year, another 6 months, another 2 years? So we can, the longevity, because they're not out driving back and forth to the nursing home.
And that was our hope from the very beginning, that we would reduce the wear and tear. And again, when I talked about reevaluating what that fleet replacement looks like, if we see a trend that we're starting to get more miles out of these vehicles, absolutely, this could be a good benefit.
Very good. Other questions? Councilor Rowan and Councilor Absalon?
Thanks, Mayor. So, recently, yesterday, the day before, I forget at this point, the governor got the statewide wildland fire predictions, and they weren't great. I mean, the earliest concerns seem to be in the western part of the state, but I think looking August, September, we have some heightened risks here. Do you have concerns, personnel, equipment, preparedness? Do you anticipate anything out of the ordinary this summer?
It goes back and forth, obviously. We trade places, eastern, western, from year to year, but we're in a pretty good situation here because we have a great relationship with our DNRC, Southern Land Office, and we have personnel that are up there. They do upstaffing during the summer. They help us actually staff more units, pay us for put people on units that we can utilize however we want. So we have a very good preparation when it comes into the wildland piece. We just got done with our annual wildland refresher. Every one of our folks is able to be deployed on any of those rigs. We also have some high-level single resource people that have significant qualifications to be able to fill roles if we have multiple situations happening. So I think we're very prepared for that situation. When we build these relationships and if we're able to deploy, at some point we start to build more relationships on the western side of the state with someone on the eastern side of the state has problems. That's our goal.
And then I think a lot of us, I certainly am, I'm sure a few other people in the community are sort of reeling over recent homeowner insurance increases. It seems like it was just Montana's turn to experience those increases, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about our response time, what our sort of community rating is, if that's in jeopardy if we don't move forward on 8 and 9. Can you just share a little bit about what the budget impacts might be?
Absolutely. Thanks. So yes, insurance is a big deal, and it's become a much bigger deal in the recent years. So we're seeing people that aren't being able to be insured in some jurisdictions. So when we think about that is always on my priorities to try to stay on top of that. Obviously, we moved up to a ISO rating of 2, and that does help a lot. And I'll always go for number 1, but because they're pretty big steps now. They historically didn't used to be. Didn't see a lot of savings from it as you moved up between maybe a 5 down to a 2, but now you're seeing significant savings based on what you can provide. My concern is we do have places on the west end that fall into a 10 that are actually in the city limits. That is just because of our travel time. So we need to eventually address that. Obviously, a lot of money tied to that, but and the same thing as we start to expand out in the heights, we're going to start see areas that yes, we are a 2 as a department, but there are certain areas based on, it's not bird's eye, it's how long it takes to get there based on road travel. So you got to be so close to a fire station to fall within that to get that 2 rating. And we're finding more and more of your constituents that possibly fall outside that. And we do have a map on our website you can look at and kind of see where that is and what areas we're focused on, but the west end is right where
That's really helpful. Thanks. I certainly hope that someone will ask about crew. I'll skip it for now, but I assume someone will ask to get an update on that.
Very good. Councilor Schlatter, Scott?
Thanks. Chief, you and I have had some conversations along with your assistant chiefs, and I appreciate your time and your thoughts and your candor in those discussions. A couple of points and encouragement, I guess I would give as we look. You noted that you're going to have 2 positions vacant. You're going to end up with some vacancy savings inherently because you're not going to trigger your academy yet. Can we be looking at bumping that strategic plan into this fiscal year once you feel comfortable that you've seen the vacancy savings to cover that cost? I think you said it was around $70,000. In my discussions with Finance Director Zeller, somewhere in that 4 to 6 month range here in the first part of this budget, you'll have realized those vacancy savings to cover the cost of that. I'd encourage you to please look at, assuming we don't burn that in overtime, please look at rolling that strategic plan into this fiscal year out of 27 and come back with a budget amendment if we need to. I mean, depending on how we do this budget, let's get that done. I think that's important on a number of fronts. It's some questions that I've been asking here for the last year about where are our capital costs coming I know we have station problems. And frankly, as we enter, contract negotiations with fire next year, I mean, we are not ever going to be able to be the highest paying operator in the state of Montana or in the region. And we've got to start looking at strategic investments in both equipment and in facilities as a part of that employee retention plan. And if as you've indicated, our equipment is in pretty good shape. We feel pretty good about that, but our stations are a whole different discussion. And we need to be looking at the investments in those stations as a part, not just of something that we need to do from a capital standpoint, but also as a point of employee retention and job satisfaction and emotional well-being also. So I'd encourage you to get this done so that we can start having some real conversations about what we need to be looking at for station remodels, station builds, and those types of things as we're moving down the line, because it feels like there is a bomb coming in some capacity in the not too distant future. It may not be in my term here on council, but sometime in the next 10 years, we're going to have a pretty damn expensive issue with our stations, and we got to be being proactive about that. So please get that rolled into this fiscal year through vacancy savings as you're going through that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman Haspeliter, Mayor and Council. That is something that will be on my list. This is going to be a month-to-month thing as I look through my budget and what we're going to be doing with as we lose people. And obviously, we will experience some vacancy savings until we can run another recruit academy. So absolutely. Just obviously monitoring our overtime as well, because as we lose people, overtime shoots up. So the conglomeration of that, I would love to see a strategic put in place sooner than later. So thank you.
Very good. Anything else? Councilmember Ripsis?
Thank you, Mayor Chief. I want to go back to this, your comment that we've got places in town that are ISO 10. We've got a lot of projected costs, presumably to address these issues out on the outskirts of town, that have lower level services than the core of our city does. Yet, as I'm thinking back over all the annexations and zonings as we've done over the last few years, I don't think ever once have I heard the fire department say, you know what, that's great, we can annex this, we can service it, but it's going to be ISO 10 out there, and it's going to cost those homeowners more in insurance, and it's going to cost us as we then start projecting out how we're going to service all this in terms of millions and millions of dollars of new equipment and stations in the future. We're not talking about new system development fees or whatever those are to put those out there. This kind of shocks me, honestly, because we've never heard this. We have to do a much better job of that. And we have to be honest about the costs of these new developments out on the outskirts, and what they're going to do to us, maybe not today, but in 10 years, when we need to put new stations out there and man them and put new fire engines and all that kind of stuff. So I would hope as we continue to annex into the city, we start seeing more and more of that transparency. Because honestly, when I look at this stuff, I won't be here to deal with it. I won't be sitting at this table. Other people will have to make that decision, but as a taxpayer, I will. And we're racking up lots of future costs here. That's my only feedback. But.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman Ripsis. And that, as we, absolutely. I think more transparency needs to happen. I was part of the last ISO process, so I think we just need to get out in front of some of this. And as we're seeing these insurance problems, we need to become more involved in those decisions we're making, and at least just bringing it to the table and saying, this is the impact. So that is something I will work on.
I just want to echo that. I was truly shocked. I have a cabin at the end of a road in the mountains on a hill on a one-way road, and it's ISO 10. So that we have anything in the city limits that approaches that is mind-boggling. So Councilor Ripsis, and we'll try to get to our municipal court presentation. I'm sorry, Councilor Renese?
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, what did I say? Ripsis, okay.
Chief, you've covered a lot here tonight. And I think we could have had 1 or 2 work sessions on everything you've covered, because I got a lot of questions. So I'll have to talk to you another time about this. But I wanted to say that when I look at this, there's a lot of good things in here. I like the idea of you looking at revenue generation. Frank Ewell and I talked about that 7 years ago, I think it was. And you're finally starting to do it. And so that's good. Government does move slow. And so my concern is, as I look at this though, you mentioned that, we're in a budget crisis in a lot of ways. And yet when I look at the numbers, where your budget's increasing 3.4%. We just had a presentation last night from the police force, and they're lowering their budget 2.9%. So your budget's almost $1 million more. So where is it that we're supposed to be holding our funds at 55 million overall for the funds? Where is it that you're doing to help hold that fund there? Where can you bring that down to where you're actually, like the police is, cutting another $630,000 or $40,000 out of your budget instead of increasing, almost $1 million?
The extra, thank you, Councilman East. The extra, yes, we did not bring it down like the police department did. There was some other caveat that came into that as far as some debt service and stuff that we didn't get rid of. But, overall, I'm trying not to lose people. So, but with that, with all those services that we provide, between the 2 big asks that we had, one of them being kind of a life, is a life or death type of tool that we use. And the second one being, I understand it is an increase to my budget, but I also want to focus on the fact that we could potentially generate revenue with it. So, I know it's not immediate money that's coming back to the city, but I think we just need to start looking in that direction to be able to generate that revenue. Really, the only places I have to cut are those 2 big asks that I have. The other ones are station improvements that we can't get around. It's infrastructure. It's not facelifts. So the capital items I really can't get around. So the two asks that I have would be just not to do those things. But I'm trying to look forward to past this year, so we're not having the same conversation next year. So that's my focus. But that's, I think, probably not going to appease all of the questions you have with that. But I certainly want to continue these conversations and work through this budget.
No, I appreciate you answering that. And I don't disagree that these are all important things. But I think when you talk about possibly having brownouts of fire stations, we have brownouts of police coverage all over the city. And so those are the things that I think when we have to look at both of the balancing this, we've seen the police department come to the table and say, we're having some vacancies here, we're helping out. And I appreciate what you say you need, but I think the police department needs an awful lot too for all the same life-saving type of things and crime prevention and crime reduction in our city and traffic control as well. So I'm just kind of surprised that I didn't see, a reduction like saw in the police department, because they've sacrificed quite a bit to help our department. But that's all I've got. But thank you very much. Mary, you can move on to the next.
Yeah, we'll move on to the municipal court, but I just want to clarify, I think both our city administrator and finance director want to address the police department budget issue, or at least I hope they do, and to the extent to which that budget went down just because one of their expenses went away, namely paying off the evidence center using TIF dollars. But is that what you were going to comment on? And if so, how much was that reduction?
I believe the payoff of the evidence center was 2.2 million. That sounds right. Yeah, 2 million. The only thing I would comment to Councilmember Neese, I forgot your name there for a second. The fire department did have requests in their requested budget that for additional capital, and part of balancing that budget, we made the recommendation that, hey, let's just stick with what was in the CIP. That's what you're seeing, the cardiac monitors. I mean, they have, we did make reductions. That was to get even to the initial proposed budget. So we have made reductions from their original requested budget as well.
Very good. All right, well, thank you very much, Chief. Again, welcome to the new, to your new department.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's in these budget times, but anyway, we appreciate your efforts. And Chief Banfield and everybody else that's here this evening, thanks very much. Judges, come to our table. Council, let's not take a break tonight. Just keep moving. But if anybody does want to take a trip to the bathroom, feel free. It's an informal time.
Yep, I'll get it you started.
Guys, well, you're frowning and walking aggressively my way.
I'm gonna do my clerk duties. So they don't get
Hey,
mad
are
at me
we ever
tomorrow.
gonna get like a tour or an orientation of this building?
Yes, you can do whatever you want. Wait for the open house till like.
No, I don't want an open house, but I tried to figure out the parking garage today and I think I about caused 86 accidents. I just don't get how this goes. At all. It's not.
It is very simple.
What's the complication?
North, center, and south.
I just don't know how it works. I don't know where anything is. I don't know how to get into places. I don't know where my pass works. I know nothing about it.
That's still what you gotta do. I do the back part.
Okay.
There. I just gotta go and bring it.
Very good. You're getting good at this.
That's nice.
Kevin.
Yeah.
It's nice for you.
Chris is paying me extra for clerk duties.
Here you go.
It looks like we lost a lot of people, so. Yeah. They'll be back. So let's give it just a couple minutes. When they come out, we say, we're done.
You are the only one who wants to be up on the dais.
No, because this doesn't, because I can't even see who's down there.
Maybe that's on purpose.
Well, that's true.
Sitting back there, it is really hard.
Back.
Like
there.
right here, yeah.
So much for my let's not take a break speech.
You need to go.
No? No? No. We're sorry the fire department took
Yeah, that took a long, I thought you talked
15
to
minutes.
You think that was the? I don't really think that's how.
He did add half a
No,
dozen
I get that,
slides.
but there was a lot in there that I.
There was, but he added about half a dozen. Yes. Well, in dollars value. Yeah. But to one. Yeah. It was over 100 calls. It was Mike.
down there.
Yeah. For 94 days. You'll see him again. Yeah.
I'm sure he already has a ticket.
Yeah.
I'm not even joking.
No, he probably does, but they just wait 20 to 30. We just missed 30.
And give him a ticket.
I know that. No, and we did that all. And you know, I think people.
Have all the service.
Could you imagine this 11 grand? That wasn't even.
Hmm?
The medical that was down 11 grand.
Yeah.
Me either. I tried today and like panicked and ran away.
Okay.
I ended up parking on the other side and I thought, oh, well, I'll just go in that door. Nope. Because it's like two of the doors are locked and one of them is just a terrifying stairwell. So like, I literally do not know how this building works. It is such a mystery.
Okay, I think we're all here. We'll get started. Well, welcome back, everyone. Glad you came back. I appreciate your stick-to-itness. Okay, we left off with our municipal court presentation, so we'll just turn it over to Judge Kolar, who can also introduce Britannia, or however you want to work it. So it's all yours.
She does all the work, so everybody knows Britannia. Goes to all the meetings. So you guys, I've done this presentation many times. Well, I can invite you now.
Yeah. And Judge, if you can put these mics are really specific, so very good. That's much better, though.
Better?
That's much better.
It's better. That's loud. Not as loud as this. So anyway, so municipal court, as you know, we do the misdemeanors. And they're all the misdemeanors within the city of Billings. We have 2 full-time judges. You guys, I'm going to go really fast if there's questions. You stop me and ask me. We have 1 grant-funded position now. So we'll discuss our treatment court. I know that at one point I was going to ask for $120,000 of treatment court. We are not asking for that because of obviously the shortfalls. And we did, and I'm probably going to jump all around. Sorry, Britannia. So we did ask, we got an extension on our 1 grant. So it was going to expire in 2025 October, but it is going to extend to October 2026. So we can continue on with treatment court for a year. We don't have to ask for the 120,000. We're exploring different avenues as well that we may, Department of Transportation, we may get that funding for about 145,000, which would deal with DUIs. Additionally, we don't know yet. They opened it up in the middle of their time. They usually open that up in October, so they did open that early for us. Okay, so court cases. We have 12 new court cases, 12,000 new court cases. Hearings, 29,000 scheduled, 13,000 actually held, 8,000 not held. Because I think I know what's going on is master schedules, and some of these, they are getting resolved a lot quicker because I said we were going to work on that. So working on with the master schedule, like I talked to you guys earlier, right when I see the people, I give them an omni, a calendar call date, and then trial week, all on one master schedule. If you miss calendar call, you waive your right to jury trial. So therefore, depends if it's less than a year punishment, then you can go right into a bench trial. A lot of people with our failures to appear, they don't show up to calendar calls. So then what it used to be, we would have to set a bench warrant, and they wouldn't show up. And then finally we'd get them in jail, and then maybe we could have a trial, but then we'd have to reappoint a public defender. And so it was a lot of wasted time. This way now they're going, and we're resolving cases very, very quick. Failures to appear warrants, and this is what I'm pretty excited about. In 2024, 5,378, 2025, 3,461, and that is the master schedule. And the failures to appear, because we are having those bench trials.
The problem with that, and I know that the city or the Billings Police Department they have to struggle a little bit with the overtime because we have a lot of cases set on that bench trial date because we're doing subpoenas because the cases are going. So we have a lot of officers off the street. You know, there's good and bad in all the things that we're trying to do, but on that, I think what we've done is we've had the priority, like the officers that are coming off night shift, they go first. We're running through those pretty quick. They're resolving a lot of cases too. So even, and again, at jail, at arraignments, what we've been doing, the city's been working really hard. I say, city, do you have an offer? Normally, you don't get an offer right at arraignment. Usually it's like, okay, we're gonna set it for Omni, and then we're gonna set it this, and then it's down the road, and then the person doesn't show up and they disappear. But right there when they're being arraigned, do you want an offer? Do you want to plead guilty or not? It's up to you, voluntary. A lot of them have been doing that, so my hearings that are happening with all the officers are starting to get a lot smaller because we're getting a lot less cases because we're getting cases resolved. So that's working out really well. We have done a lot of paper. We've gone paperless, as I've talked about. Britannia's worked very hard. I've done the digital docket. We have still a hard file that we have up on the bench, but pretty much I can do court with FCE, just pull it up and see the dockets. So that's been helping out quite a bit. Most everything is electronic, even our suspended driver's license. And we're working with the Billings Police Department for automating tickets. And is that in place yet, or is that?
It's the full automation of the we just signed a close to purchase the last 25 licenses.
So less
So-
people touching the cases, the tickets. They go in and then they just generate into our system.
So the east sides kind of, they eliminate points of entry, at least 2 points of entry for one for BBD and one for us. So it does save a lot of time for the officers, saves a lot of time for BPD clerkal staff, and it saves a lot of time for our staff because they electronically import the image. There's not, you don't have to read handwriting. So, and it saves a lot of time during the stop because they just drive.
So I've already talked about our fiscal challenges on treatment court. I've already talked to you guys about that. We found some funding to get us through to another year. Next time we come in front of you guys, hopefully the federal government has shut down us being able to apply for grants. So that's kind of put us in an interesting position. For the last 20 years, we've been funded by grants from the federal. So that's why I was coming to you guys for 120, but I understand we found another way around that. The other thing is the pretrial programs that I'm going to ask you guys for, and I have the numbers. When it pencils out, we're asking for 40 grand. I know that's, you know, we've got budget issues, but when you compare that to a person who's in jail that has to have GPS before they leave or a scram bracelet, you're saving $500,000 versus the 40 versus the 500,000 because they're sitting there and again they're taking up the time. Like I was talking before, some of you guys were on break. That we had a person that was in jail for 90 some days. The case had to be dismissed because he was not competent, and it cost the city $11,000 for him sitting in jail. And then the case was dismissed because he's not competent. And then, go ahead.
Can I just talk, I'm not sure if you're all aware of the pretrial program. It was a
Yeah, describe what the 40,000 would go
So
for.
basically, the pretrial programs run through justice court, and it provides subsidies, court check-ins for people being released from jail. It was a state-funded pilot program, and they have decided not to fund the program due to the addition of 2 district court judges. So justice court still plans on staffing it. So basically, we were provided subsidies for BMC misdemeanors. So the subsidies help pay for pretrial release, like GPS monitoring, check-ins, so people can be released from jail and still have some accountability. So basically, all those subsidies are now going away. BMC was taking up 75% of the state subsidies. So we kind of been working with Judge Carter and pretrial to come up with that 40,000 to make sure we are releasing people from jail. So basically, it's $9 for the subsidy or $125 for them to stay in jail. there is some cost savings.
Mostly covers the cost of the bracelet?
Yes.
Mostly.
Yeah, so, and also helps with, say, revocations. We see a lot of revocations where pretrial revocations, where people don't sign up for Scram, electronic monitoring, because they can't afford it. So the subsidy also helps with that. And revocation costs, the city attorney's office, a lot of time, our office, a lot of time, and BCC, a lot of time. So they are really important.
Is that part of the existing budget, or that's be something on top of what we're looking at now?
Had discussed, it's something on top we are asking in addition to.
It's in our
anything else.
budget. We didn't ask for it last year, but you don't see a large increase in operations and maintenance because in fiscal year 25, we had a lot of one-time costs for the move. So we didn't ask for those these years, obviously, because the move is over. So you don't see a big fluctuation.
It's built into this 5% O&M
Yep.
increase. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, love that. And then so for our study that I was here already earlier, a couple months ago, about implementing the study, the second judge. I've already talked to you guys about that. There is a slide. I'm going to go through quickly, skip over that because we've already discussed that with you guys. Unless you guys have any questions on that. Any other additional questions?
How's it going?
It's going great. Judge Heller's doing a great job. We have a great schedule in that we're handling a lot of things, and it's been very smooth. Like I said, we moved over here. We didn't delay court. We had a court still going while everybody was up and running over here. I had my court running back in the other building, and then when all the technology and everything was smooth, and we moved, it just was very seamless. Plus, it was the coldest, as you said, the coldest week of the year. What was it, sub? It was horrible. Okay, and so that's a funny thing. You should ask that because you don't get more fines if you don't have more tickets. So, you see what I'm saying? No, it's just you have the same amount of tickets. So just because you have a different judge, your cases just get processed a lot faster. That's the benefit of the two judges. We don't get double the fines because you only have so many tickets that the officers write. Yeah. Oh, I did. 1.5 judge. I did do a lot of them. Yeah.
Judge, one of the recommendations out of the study that the CGL study that we haven't ever really talked about was driving without insurance, that represented about 10% of the caseload, and they made a number of recommendations to reduce that. Are those on the radar screen at all?
So, yeah, they are, because what the city's doing right off the bat are amending him to a no driver's license. But, the officers are still writing the ticket. And so is it lowering? Yes, they're they're amending him to no driver's license, and then the city is coming in and making those offers, even on a no driver's license, $150 fine, it's resolved, then they're done with their case, they don't have to come back.
Okay, great.
So
Thanks.
we have addressed that. So looks like we're coming in under budget due to vacancy savings. And I don't know if there's any other questions you guys have about that. We're coming in a good spot. Then we want to look at, our revenue, not revenue, but our 18.6 increase in fines and fees from 2023. And that's not because of the fines like you're asking, because you have two judges. It's because we have a good collection agency that we switched to that are very aggressive. And so that has helped significantly. So projected goal, we're 1,293,000. We're at 1,201,000 at this point. So did you have questions? Oh, okay. And then there is some new laws, obviously, out of the Supreme Court about fines, we used to make people pay at least $60 on time pay. We can't do that. The Supreme Court has said that is not, can't do that. So what I do talk to them a little bit more. What can you pay? And they tell me how much they can pay, and then I can say your time pay is, sometimes it's only $25. And it seems to be working. What's difficult is people who owe on restitution. And you have people that have been hit by somebody who doesn't have insurance. And that person is collecting $25 a month, if that. And it's very difficult on victims. And it's concerning, but that's what the legislature did with our drive them while suspended. You can't suspend somebody's driver's license for failure to pay on restitution or fines and fees. So it's kind of put victims in a position. We already talked about our treatment court again, different avenues that we've looked at. We're hopeful that we'll get the DOT 146 grand. Hopeful. And there's other options we're looking at. But again, we can proceed with treatment court for another year. So that's good because that is a benefit. Again, keeping people out of jail. You have treatment court. They're out of jail. They're getting jobs. They're paying taxes. I mean, they're running their businesses. I've got several graduates that I would love to have a couple of them come talk to you guys. At one point, I just didn't want to take up all your time, and it wasn't really an issue for this year, but who they have went through felony probation and continued to commit crimes, drug crimes, and now is a thriving construction business owner who has a child and a family and is very thankful and grateful that he had the opportunity. And he said, like, regular probation did not work for him. And so it's good to see that then again, individuals that aren't still sitting in jail, they're being allowed to kind of get their life together. Mental health is a huge issue. And we heard it from the fire department, huge issue. And that's it. Any questions? I went through that really quick.
How about some questions?
I love it. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. It's clean. It's easy to get to. Easy to get people set in court. I don't know.
It's nice to have 2 functional courtrooms and 2 functional jury rooms.
Yes.
And
But you don't feel like a sardine anymore.
No.
well, I was going to say having like appropriate space for the staff is, I feel so spread out now because it's like, where are my people?
Right.
Scott has a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And Judge, I'm scattered at this point after 2 nights of all this stuff. So I'm unclear as to what you said with respect to the pretrial program and that $40,000. Is that in your budget currently, or do we need to find a way to
Well,
backfill that?
We asked for it. It's not on our budget. We had, what did you guys granted us, like $6 grand or $3 grand last year? We're asking for additional amount. Yes.
But what's in here?
It's in there.
Yes,
Yes,
it's in there,
it was
right.
not
Okay.
cut. It's in the request.
So
and
it's in.
We were only seeing 5% increase on it in the 40,000.
Okay, so you're covered to the extent that you think you need to be covered on the pretrial program.
Yeah, we worked with pretrial to work on an estimate. That's kind of what we are spending currently on DMC subsidies.
Okay,
Well, not we, but the state of Montana.
the only thing that I would ask is, like, keep us apprised of that. I mean, if we need to start to increase that budget for the value that provides, I think that's a conversation we absolutely should be having with respect to entitlement shares in other places in the city, just based on the rate of return in savings that gets. So, I mean, if you see as we go into the next year and years coming that we need to look at increasing that to increase proportionately the effectiveness of the program, then we should absolutely be talking about that. And that's for you guys to tell us, but that's something that I'd like to be keenly aware of as you continue to go forward.
I'm going to grab that same point and run with, does that 40,000 assume just covering what the system is doing now? Or does it assume the opening of the short-term holding facility in October?
It does not include the short term.
Should it? Because don't we want most of those people going out on monitoring?
I'm not going to say no to more subsidy pretrial
Yeah.
funding. I am a huge fan of the pretrial
Yes,
program.
me too.
It does amazing things. It's kind of our only resource to assist people who are getting out of jail right
Yeah.
now. And with the increase with the short term, I think increases the subsidies. So right now it's only people who are qualified for the PSA program.
Income.
No, so not everyone goes through the PSA. It's just new offenses. But I think they have said they would be willing to also offer subsidies to people who are not in the program. They always touch on those people as well. Lisa, she handles the TSA. I'm sure she and Judge Carter would love to come and talk to you guys about it more in depth and kind of what they're facing budget-wise with the state decreases, if you guys are interested.
But let's say hypothetically, for the sake of argument, let's say BPD is now able to, on an average nightly basis, arrest 20 people that they right now would be giving a notice to appear for. Some will appear, some won't. The numbers in here are great to see those failures to appear reduced, but some will appear, some won't. But now we arrest everybody, we hold everybody for at least 24 hours, and they come see you the next day. The majority of them, I expect, will be in BMC. Those people need to be out after they come see you. And so if we don't fund some subsidy, the alternative is what? Just a more frequent check-in program?
No, I think that if we see them, try sentence them, and then subsidy, the subsidy would help for like alcohol monitoring. But that's not free.
You think the most of those people through the short-term hold you'll sentence at the time of initial appearance?
I do. If the city is on board like they have been, I do believe that we will.
So if we need a little bit extra for short-term hold for that new influx of people, it's gonna be pretty small. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
It's hard to say until
Yeah,
we get started.
of course.
I can't, I don't know what the officers are gonna arrest. I have my own ideas. I don't know. Lots of open containers, public urination, thefts.
Things we should be able to settle that day.
Yes. And yes. And public defender's got to be on board when that happens.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good story. Shifting just real quickly, if the jail crowding situation continues, and if the county is faced with difficult decisions, if we start losing capacity to have people serving sentences out of BMC at the detention facility, do we have access, Judge, in a way that you think, let's set PMFAs aside, right? People who absolutely need to be in, those sorts of things. Do we have access to alternatives that you think are reasonable? Community service sentences, sheriff's level detail sentences, heightened fines. Do we have some alternatives that we can employ? Or is there a budget need that we need to think about in a scenario that jail overcrowding continues?
So mandatory DUIs, 30 days. Mandatory.
It is what it is.
Medical. You can do house arrest, but I don't like doing the house arrest unless the big reason medical is, but I very seldom do I do that because I don't think the consequences are big enough to prevent somebody from the fourth and fifth and sixth. So if they're not going to allow us to detain them, I don't know. So yeah, we can do house arrest. The legislature will.
Yeah. Okay. But as it stands now, if you wanted alternatives to incarceration, you feel like you have access to some where the statute doesn't require incarceration.
Yes.
Okay.
Because we have alternatives, solutions, Rydell, and they do programs.
Work programs, those sorts of things.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Judge,
Mayor, I'm so sorry. I meant to just flag this. The increase in bench trials from 550 to 2,875 is amazing. What a good story. That is I just really want to call that statistic out. That is tremendous work. So congratulations to you and the team.
on that, it says set. Is that actually completed or just scheduled?
Scheduled, and then some, like I said, they bleed, they work. I'm going to give kudos to the city and the defense. Have really worked hard on trying to get this done. As a matter of fact, I think the study showed that we have pretty good timing for settling. Like our cases settle a lot quicker. We're well within where we should be.
Great. Two questions, Judge. One, get a lot of requests from citizens. Why don't you send people out to pick up garbage? So can you talk about kind of work programs? Is it feasible? Can we be doing more of that? Should we be doing more of that? Can we help with any of that? So that's one question. The other thing is just, what does success look like long term? I'm almost flabbergasted by this graph. This is the number of cases. It's almost as flat as a pancake over 10 years. And high point 2017. So now 8 years ago, we've steadily gone down from that, but essentially flat, even though we've had a consistent population increase of 1.5% every year. So you would have expected over that 10 years to see a 10 to 15% increase, actually maybe more than that, just based on population in these numbers, but they're not. One person could say, well, that shows success. We're seeing less crime, less, at least at the municipal level, at the misdemeanor level, crime is going down, fewer cases. Just look at that. Or we could say, well, it's because we don't have adequate resources, and so the police are self-selecting not to bring cases, even though recently we've seen a significant increase in police resources, but the numbers are still flat. So I don't know. You want to just interpret, and maybe in 10 years, what should we expect? Is this a sign of success that we just keep these numbers level, even though our population keeps going up?
I've asked myself that and have no answer. I would want to say yes, it's success. But I fear that, I do fear that we've had violent crimes. I think it's going to become more common crime, obviously. And I think that officers, the best they can, as their resources are towards violent crimes. And citizens, maybe they don't see a lot of, they're worried about some of the misdemeanor stuff, but it's just a theory. I don't know. I've said this, over from a prosecutor. They're spending more time felony violent crimes. I don't know.
I see. So their focus is there, and they're holding keeping the cap on this one. Okay, interesting. I just thought it was a little obvious, or stood out to me, and wanted to be an obvious question. Chris?
I would encourage us to consider having a work session sometime in the next several months that would include all components of the criminal justice system. So having these conversations separate between police, court, and prosecution is not as helpful as I think them all being in the same conversation to at least talk through
with the county attorney and
these
the district court
questions
judge,
and other
et cetera.
questions.
Yeah. Were you trying to say something, Brittany? No?
No, I was just thinking it'd be interesting to run district court case filings against misdemeanors.
See what the trends are there.
See, like,
Yeah.
if we're down.
Yeah. Okay. They just don't want to mess with the judge, so that they're deterred. All right. Very good. I think we'll call this a wrap, and appreciate your time. And glad you like your new digs.
Oh, I love them. I can't, I mean, it's so wonderful. All right, that it?
You get to go home.
Oh, you guys are still working? We're putting the 3-minute clock on you. Whoever's listening is listening, right?
You ready?
Yeah.
We are off to the races. Go, Andy. All right.
expenses, because the expenses for that will follow in future years. Okay. Thanks for turning that up, Kevin. Here's the breakdown of what? Oh, it was better. Here's the breakdown by the numbers that just correspond with the previous two graphs. This is overall city budget as proposed. There was a question last night about the crime prevention fund. This was provided in the overview, providing it again here. This was not added on your attached presentation, but wanted to make sure you had it as well. I'll make a note to send this to you guys. But this was the accounting for the the 2 mills, the majority of the marijuana revenue, opioid revenue, and then some grant revenue that we get for the crew positions. Chris?
Yes, no, thank you. And I just wanted to add that no commitments have been made or final, because it's been communicated in the conversations with the Family Justice Center that they would have to be reviewed and approved by this body. But as the Family Justice Center has sought to figure out how to make the renovations to their facility, what I have talked to them about, and some others, is that any funds here that would be unspent in the other committed areas would be, I would make a recommendation to this body to that they be considered as grant potential to the Family Justice Center. So that's how we've looked at it so far, but they have not been in a position, frankly, to make the application through our HUD programming or ready yet to request funding for phasing of the project. So just FYI.
And the only comment I'd have to that is we need to get ready. And I mean, I understand there's some challenges there, but I mean, it's long past time. We have monkeyed around for now 8 months, 10 months. We've been talking about the HUD application. We missed a deadline. They're looking at talking about another application cycle. Like I'm going to lose my damn mind if we do not apply this for HUD funding this next cycle. There is absolutely zero reason for us not to get there. And we have some carryover funding to match that. And as we get out into 27, when we're done with the short-term hold facility, we have plenty to work through that in the 3-phased approach that was presented. So like, my patience is growing incredibly short with that.
So can I ask for some clarification, because I believe we're on the same page relative to its priority. What I don't understand is that as I understand, the application is the Family Justice's bulk court to do, and our staff has been continuing to and will continue to be encouraging to them that the moment you are ready, you need to submit materials.
And I agree with that. But we're sending $200,000 over to the Family Justice Center. That's still kind of firmly a cooperative agreement that we have with the YWCA. And like, we're either going to go or we're going to pull the plug. Like there's got to be some kind of, the runway has got to end at some damn point to see some movement. And that's not on the HUD team. That's on the Family Justice team. And that agreement that we have with the YWCA. Like, we have got to move. I'm done and tired of not.
Scott, are you suggesting not funding the 200,000 this year? If
I'm
they don't
suggesting
apply
letting
for
them
grant?
know that if we're not going to see some movement, then we're going to have a consideration, because I don't know how else to get it across. I mean, I would hate to see it. I'd hate to see it.
I don't disagree.
But I don't
with
know
you.
what else to do.
But I also think, I mean, the Family Justice Center is not some wholly independent nonprofit walking around looking to submit a HUD application. This is a partnership, and I'm concerned that we are saying we will answer any question you have, or we'll work through the details, but we're somehow still treating them arm's length on this funding process. I confess that I don't understand why. I mean, if this is a city project, why we can't just say we're going to put our portion of HUD, our CDBG dollars into it, I don't understand why there has to be an arm's length application. If there has to be, why aren't we writing it? Like, this should be a partnership. Let's get after it instead of just saying, we're going to be really responsive to your questions as you apply and figure out compliance.
I think my description doesn't give full justice. I don't want to pretend as if I've been in the middle, because I haven't.
Yeah.
I think the staff has done more than just say we're ready. I know they've
I agree.
held meetings and walked through processes and informed the group. I think maybe the disconnect, and I can't say with certainty the federal rules or not, is how much of this has to be an open process versus the city saying we have a partnership and therefore this is the way we're going to go. But
maybe we could understand that better.
Sure.
Because we're not submitting the application to HUD.
Yeah.
These are our dollars, right?
Sure.
And so we control some of these processes. And of course, there has to be compliance. And I know the reporting on the back end overwhelms people. I just would encourage us to treat this as a real partnership. Although I don't disagree that the partnership does have to be two ways.
Yep, absolutely.
And this is a conversation for a later day, but we got to get an operational board put in place.
Mhm.
That this cannot be run specifically and directly under the YWCA. We have an MOU, we've got to develop an operational board so that we have some input and we have some drivers, because right now we are a ship without a rudder is what it feels like. And we need to put some structural oversight in place that can drive this MOU. That's a discussion for a later date, but we've got some work to do on the Family Justice Center.
So maybe we need some sort of a report,
We've had that.
Last piece I would put on is when at the Family Justice Center conference said I was fortunate enough to be able to attend. We did sit down with Ken. I'm lapsing on his last name, who's the gentleman who helped us all the way through the strategic planning process. And I took from that conversation that, and again, this is not to say we're going fast enough or too slow, but that we are in a very natural transition. We went from creation development with our volunteer to our Family Justice Center coordinator, and that is a natural evolution to a Family Justice Center director and an actual leader there who's in charge. So I think we're in the right trajectory, but I hear you, and I will certainly express that. I'm sure they'll go back and listen to this recording as to the sense of urgency to keep things moving and get them moving faster. Thank you.
And so, Mayor, if I could, while we're being grumpy about nonprofit partners, I'd like to be a little grumpy about Nurse Family Partnership, because this was a commitment made very clearly designed to be catalytic. This was going to be a short-term accelerant, again, along this line of addressing domestic violence and high-risk families, with the understanding that we would be working in partnership towards addressing the long-term financial sustainability, primarily insurance billability, whether it's Medicaid or private insurance or whatever it is. I don't believe those conversations have taken place. We certainly didn't have a proposal in this legislative session. And if we're not getting serious about putting one together for 2027, I'm not interested in seeing that funding continue. This is not a subsidy. It was designed to be a catalyst.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I'm trying to remember, is a 3-year agreement that we
Some
put.
opportunities to
I totally agree as a catalyst. I'll be candid. I don't understand the full federal funding side of this and the state with Medicaid, Medicare, those various components. I think I've always assumed, maybe wrongfully, that there's going to be a local conversation about how to fund some of this program as well. Ultimately, as you said, that this will be a catalyst running the program from 2 to 4. But I understand the data for home visits actually needed to be triple or quadruple that size. And depending on the state of Montana or the federal government to solve those issues for us locally, we got to look in the mirror and oftentimes say, how are we going to tackle that with their assistance? So I'll be glad to reach out. I've already playing tag with John Forte, who direct there, and tell him about this conversation and the concern about where are we at, and get a report from them to come in and report on the program, its progress, and where's it going forward.
And it's the same conversation we had when we adopted the funding. It's one where I have repeatedly offered to be helpful, and we haven't gotten traction there. And so I just want to be clear that I'm not going to continue to support funding if we don't get serious about the sustainability of it.
Chris, is this the second year or the third year of that commitment?
Correct. I think FY '26 will be the third year.
Okay. Ken Shetter. Ken Shetter. There you go. Okay, back to you, Andy.
All right. Much of that discussion was well over my head, so not to belittle it,
We took
but
it all out
yeah,
of your 3 minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
You're
leave
done
it to you
now,
guys
Andy.
to figure that out. Here again, just the mill breakdown as a response to the state legislation. Right now, we believe that the total mills will be about 247 mills, but the cost of a mill going down by 36% to the median home. Still, you guys had some discussion about how you want to present that, both at your resolution for adoption on setting those mills and on the tax bill. They would be identical. These are kind of the two options there. Don't need a decision tonight, but we will need a decision when we set the mills in August, I believe the 23rd or 5th, whatever that Monday is. So if you want to talk more about that, happy to. Based upon the proposed budget, the number of mills, the corresponding special assessment, the street maintenance district is the only citywide one. This would be a reduction of $205 to the median home for the city of Billings portion of your tax bill. This is an expanded chart from one I had provided initially, really just for your benefit and to answer, I think, a question that was asked relative to kind of a couple things here. One, I broke out the non-departmental costs, the elements that were the transfer to the library and the transfer to the Parks and Rec fund, comparing 26 to 25, their proportionate shares, and then the percentage change from 26 to 25. This is general fund and public safety combined. I think that captures all the percentages and changes that were asked. So I won't go through it, but there were some questions about that a couple weeks ago. Yep. Okay, so the first column, obviously the departments. The next column, the FY26 proposed dollar amount. This is general fund and public safety combined, not citywide. Then the FY26 proportion, so what percentage of that 85 million is for police or fire or transfer to parks, et cetera. Then the FY25 dollars that were for those same departments, the proportionate share for FY25. And then the next column is the dollar change from 25 to 26, and then what percentage change that is. So if we just go straight across for city admin, 2.4 million in FY26, that made up 2.9% of the total public safety general fund. It was 2.5 million in 25, or 3% of that total in 25. It's a reduction of 111,000, or a reduction of 4.3% of that department's budget.
Randy, just to clarify, I think this is what I was looking for. And I talked about it tonight, so just correct me if I'm wrong. If I look at the police line where it changed about 1.9 million, that's what you're saying, that was the $2 million
so
that they came out of, that was for the debt payment, right?
Correct. The debt payment was a little over 2 million. So obviously that's a one-time thing. If you excluded that from FY25, they would have a slight increase over.
Okay. So
over 25.
that's very helpful. Thank you. That
Yeah.
that actually kind of helps correct kind of what I talked about the chief. So the police is going up a little bit.
Correct.
After the debt, and fire is going up a lot.
For operational costs, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
That helps.
There are 3 staff recommended changes to the proposed budget. These will work through with Budget and Finance and put forward as a potential budget amendment to be proposed. This is the FTE count. I had the incorrect number initially on the overview. I sent there was in the city administrator's weekly report following the budget overview, I clarified that correction. There are 9 new FTEs in the budget. That's that top portion. You've heard about 2 additional requests that are not included in the budget. That would be in Public Works, 1 mechanic, and in building, the project coordinator, which you heard about last night. If those were included, the total would go to 11. But I want to be clear, that was my mistake on the overview. I think I had it at 7. I think I was short 2. They would add to that overall total city budget number, but they would not impact the general fund. No. And there are correct. That's the plan.
That's the plan. On the budget side, the numbers, they can be left the same. You don't see a fiscal effect from it.
Yep. Thanks for turning mine on. I'd mentioned it earlier a couple times already, so I'm going to recommend that you remove the $20 million, both the expense and the revenue in 26, and I'll have a FY25 budget amendment that same evening in June to add it into FY25. That will align with when the expenses are actually occurring and the bond sale will actually occur. This was just really timing from the CIP to the contract actually getting executed. So that's really just a timing adjustment. And then finally, we had identified that we had duplicated both a grant revenue and grant expense in the police program, which is a police grant fund of $170,000. We'll make a recommendation to remove both the revenue and the expense because it won't be duplicated. We won't be getting 360. And then the last couple things I've mentioned to you all before, I want to just remind you, obviously there's the new property tax formula. It's going to change how tax revenue in Billings, I think, grows in the future, certainly will in 26 and 27. Encourage you to consider having discussions, I'm saying beginning late 25, because if you were to put something on the ballot, I think your opportunity to affect the FY27 budget would require that you're on the primary election in 26. And this slide isn't super impactful, but I didn't want to be accused of misleading. So the full y-axis is 0 to 70 million, but if we zoom in to 53 to 60 million, this just shows, the tax revenue, projected tax revenue loss that we would have seen had the tax law not changed relative to what we expect to occur, $6 million in 2 years. And that's largely general fund and public safety. I don't have projections in 28 and ongoing, but I would presume that's probably a $2 to $3 million per year hit forever relative to what we had been experiencing. And the assumptions here for the prior tax law are very conservative. Realistically, I think that number could be quite a bit higher. But just as I think our ability to fund existing services at existing levels into the future will be challenged if nothing is done. And then to truly and finally wrap it up, again, FY26 budget's online. I want to remind you all, you received an email from me about the online budget amendment forms. Those need to be completed by June 10th in order to be included in the preliminary budget packet. The Budget and Finance Committee will meet on June 11th to discuss these 3 staff proposed amendments as well as any completed budget amendments. By that point, we will do a preliminary budget adoption at the last meeting in June. I don't know how that works exactly, but I don't think you'll actually adopt a resolution that night. You could amend the budget, have a public hearing, but it would be, I believe, held open until final budget adoption, which will occur at the last meeting in August, at which point you will adopt a FY26 budget.
But Andy, we need to, that's part of the statute to actually adopt a preliminary budget, right? So we need some piece of paper that says we hereby preliminarily adopt this preliminary budget, I guess, right? And wouldn't that be a resolution? Or just some other piece of paper?
I'm not certain that actually is what the statute requires.
Okay.
This
You'll look
is
into that.
new for us. I've reached out to some other communities who kind of take this type of approach. I don't think all of them do adopt a preliminary resolution. They hold a public hearing and hold that public hearing open until they adopt the final budget resolution. Yeah, I'll work with Gina and figure out the exact process, but potentially it looks something like that, as what I've described.
Great. I would just comment for all of us that once we've got through the budget and things calm down a little bit, I think it would be very helpful if we just asked our legislators to come back and did a little seminar for them and for the public about the impacts of Senate Bill 452 and House Bill 231. Because we think we understand it now, but they're going to have questions. We're not asking them for anything, which is actually the safest time to have people there because we're not really asking for them. But it'll be too late if we wait around another year or two. It's better while it's fresh for us, fresh for them, just to see what they have wrought, and not to point fingers, but because they were in a tough situation. But I think we owe it to them to help them understand what we're now dealing with. So that'd be my suggestion. And it's an opportunity to educate the public, which is going to be absolutely critical if we're going out for any sort of a mill levy or any sort of ask to the public. Chris?
The piece I'd add is your guys' assistance for us without Victoria and a PIO to be thinking about how to communicate both that message and this other reality at the same time, which is people's property taxes are going to be going down several $100s. Their utility rates are all been held at zero thanks to your efforts, and how that message doesn't get lost in all of this as we're going to face significant challenges next year with the kind of budget cuts that or revenue losses that we're experiencing through this. So
anything, I'm sorry, were you done, Andy?
I am wrapped up.
Okay. Questions for Andy? Okay. Your story is consistent here, Andy. You're not changing it. So that's good. We appreciate that. All right. Technically, we need to have public comment. So is there any public comment on this item? We have no members of the public to comment. So Chris, anything in the way of upcoming items? No. Council discussion? No. Public comment on non-agenda items? No. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.